Chapter 23:55. Nye Tian, what are you thinking about? Nye Dao saw Nye Tian's surprised expression and couldn't help but ask. Nothing. Nye Tian laughed and said, Grandpa, I don't think it's impossible to change the agreement made by our ancestors. The agreement was made a long time ago. We can't ruin Qingwan's happiness because of this agreement. Hearing Nye Tian's words, Nye Qingwan's beautiful eyes trembled slightly. She clearly didn't expect him to speak up for her. She quickly stepped forward and nodded her head like a rattledrum. Grandpa, Nye Tian is right. That Nangong Lin is obviously not a good person. Even if Wan dies, she won't be with him. Nye Dao's face was gloomy and very serious. Nye Qingwan was the daughter of his fifth son and his only granddaughter. She was also the only person in the Nye family who had merged with the beginning light realm. He obviously didn't want Nye Qingwan to marry into the Nangong family. But that agreement was made by the two families' ancestors after all. As the Nye family's master, was he going to go against the ancestors' agreement? Grandpa, the agreement is dead, but people are alive. Nye Tian knew what Nye Dao was worried about. He faintly smiled and said, I think if the ancestors were still alive, they also wouldn't want to see the Nye family's descendants be wronged. This. Nye Dao was speechless for a moment. He knew what Nye Tian said made sense, but some things, if they wanted to break it, they might have to pay a big price. Not to mention that the Nangong family didn't want to see the Nye family break the agreement. Even many people in the Nye family didn't want to break the agreement. As the master of the family, if Nye Dao didn't follow the ancestors' agreement, his position as the master of the family would be shaken. Grandpa, this matter concerns Qingwan's happiness. The Nye family can't make a decision lightly. Nye Tian looked at Nye Dao and said, Since the people from the Nangong family have already come, let them wait. Just say that Qingwan is still young and the ancestors' agreement can be discussed in a few years. Nye Dao nodded solemnly, agreeing to Nye Tian's suggestion. Nye Tian nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. He already knew what the ancestors of the two families were planning, so of course he had to stop this so-called agreement. The fat cat had said that even if two people were to be together, it would take thousands of years before the origin connection could be formed. How could he exchange Nye Qingwan's lifetime of happiness for an origin connection that might not necessarily happen? If Nye Qingwan liked Nangong Ling, it would be a different story. However, if Nye Qingwan didn't want to marry him, no one could force her. Most importantly, Nangong Lin was not a good person. Nye Tian felt that Nangong Ling and Lai Yen Jiufeng definitely knew each other. Otherwise, they would not have waited at the Nine Heavens mountain range and ambushed him. When Nye Qingwan saw that Nye Dao actually agreed to postpone fulfilling the ancestors' promise, she couldn't help but be stunned. QL11 After a while, she turned to look at Nye Tian and thought, Who is this guy? Why does Grandpa listen to him so much? She was very curious about Nye Tian's true identity and why Nye Dao valued him so much. It seemed that Nye Tian should be her cousin, but she had never seen Nye Tian before. Oh right, Nye Tian, why have you come to Wind and Cloud Alliance this time? Nye Dao temporarily put aside the matter of Nye Qingwan and looked at Nye Tian. Nye Tian must have come to Wind and Cloud Alliance for something very important that he hadn't mentioned yet. Grandpa, I have come to Wind and Cloud Alliance to ask you for a favor. Nye Tian nodded slightly and said, We are family, no need to be so polite. Nye Dao laughed brightly and said, Speak. As long as Grandpa can do it, I will definitely help you. Amen. Nye Tian nodded again and said no more politeness. Grandpa, I want you to let someone go. Let someone go? Who? Nye Dao was stunned. Seeing Nye Tian's serious face, he frowned. Qisha. Nye Tian said a name, his eyes slightly trembling. He had already guessed Qisha's identity, but in order to fulfill his promise, he must let Wind and Cloud Alliance go. More importantly, whether Qisha could be released or not was related to Share. Nie Tian did not want Cher to forever be a manifestation of the heaven-punishing demon heart. He wanted Shuer to become a real person. Qisha. Hearing this name, Nie Dao's expression changed slightly and said in shock, "Are you talking about the person who once challenged your father?" "Yes, that's him." Nie Tian nodded heavily and noticed that Nie Dao's expression had changed. Nie Dao calmed down and said, "This person is cruel and bloodthirsty. He is very vicious. When your father fought against him, he almost died in his hand. Why did you let him go?" Nie Tian's gaze darkened. He did not expect Qisha to be so terrifying that he almost killed Nie Fenghua. It seemed that it was very difficult for Nie Fenghua to defeat Qisha. The battle back then must have been very tragic. Nie Tian did not hide anything and briefly explained the agreement between him and the Nets and Net. "So you want to fulfill your promise?" Nie Dao frowned. His expression did not look good. "Grandfather, do you have any difficulties?" Nie Tian looked at Nie Dao and asked. "Nie Tian, you're late." Nie Dao let out a deep breath and said, "Back then, Qisha was defeated by your father and was indeed imprisoned in the Wind and Cloud Alliance's storm dungeon. However, not long after he was imprisoned, Qisha tried to escape the dungeon and killed hundreds of guards. In the end, I personally subdued him. After that, I ordered someone to send him to another place. So now Qisha is no longer in the Wind and Cloud Alliance." Nie Tian's gaze was already shocked. "Qisha is no longer in the Wind and Cloud Alliance." Nie Dao nodded his head, but did not say where 7 Kills was. "Grandfather, where is Qisha now?" Nie Tian frowned and asked directly. Nie Dao looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but sigh. After a moment of hesitation, he finally said, "The Dark Sea Prison." Dark Sea Prison. Nie Tian's gaze trembled and his expression froze when he heard the name. He did not expect Nie Dao to send Qisha to the Dark Sea Prison. Nie Tian had never been to the Dark Sea Prison, but he had heard of it. The Dark Sea Prison was a place to imprison the most ruthless people in the realms. The Dark Sea Prison floated outside the 9 realms and was equivalent to a prison shared by the 9 realms. Some extremely ruthless or difficult to deal with people would usually be sent to the Dark Sea Prison after they were captured. Yi Qinghai had once been imprisoned in the Dark Sea Prison, and was the only person to escape from it in the past hundreds of thousands of years. Nie Tian even knew that when Yi Qinghai escaped from the Dark Sea Prison, he had brought others with him, including the Crimson Moon Divine Palace's palace master, Qi Yefeng. He did not expect Nie Dao to send Qisha to the Dark Sea Prison. Things were going to get troublesome. No wonder Nie Dao was hesitant to reveal Qisha's whereabouts. Chapter 2356. Dark Ocean Prison. Nie Tian muttered to himself. His face was gloomy, but his eyes were surging with an indescribable excitement. Nie Tian, you're not really going to the Dark Ocean Prison to save 7 Kills, are you? Nie Dao frowned when he saw Nie Tian's expression, and asked in surprise. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a faint smile as he said, "Grandpa, I've already promised the people from the Heaven and Earth Net that I will release the 7 Kills. Since 7 Kills is currently imprisoned in the Dark Ocean Prison, I have no other choice but to go there to save him." Nie Dao's eyes trembled. Nie Tian really wanted to go to the Dark Ocean Prison to save someone. The Nets and Nets was an organization that was not weaker than the Holy Parliament. Even the Wind and Cloud Alliance might not be able to go against them. More importantly, Nie Tian had already made a promise. Therefore, he had to go to the Dark Ocean Prison. Nie Tian, the Dark Ocean Prison, is one of the most dangerous places in the 9 realms. Even I have never been there. Nie Dao's eyes flickered. He was clearly very worried. "Are you really going to, grandfather? I have no other choice." Before Nie Dao could finish, Nie Tian laughed. His voice was calm, but his eyes were extremely determined. "This." Nie Dao's expression turned ugly. He then thought of something and said, "Nie Tian, I know I can't stop you from going to the dark ocean prison, but you can wait. Yi Qinghai was also once imprisoned in the dark sea prison, and he even escaped from it. QL11, I'll immediately send someone to find him. Once I find him, tell him to come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Then you can go to the dark ocean prison with him. How about that? Nie Tian knew that Nie Dao was worried for him, but he smiled bitterly and said, Grandfather, I'm afraid it won't be easy to find Elder Hai. Even if I'm willing to wait, the nets and nets may not give me the time. Nie Dao was stunned. He wanted to say something. Bang! However, at this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from outside. Someone has trespassed into the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nie Dao suddenly stood up, releasing his aura like a mad lion. Let's go take a look. He roared, and his figure flashed, rushing out of the Wind and Cloud Palace. Nie Tian and the others came to their senses and immediately followed. At the same time, a violent figure stood high up in the sky above the huge wind cloud square. His eyes were filled with playfulness, and at the same time, he released an extremely strong evil aura. On the ground of the square, dozens of guards were lying in disorder. They were heavily injured, but they were not dead. These guards were all injured by this violent figure. This person was none other than Lai Yen Jiufeng. Wind and Rain Alliance's guards only have this much strength? How disappointing! Lai Yen Jiufeng smiled coldly. His attitude was extremely arrogant. Trespassing into the Wind and Cloud Alliance, you're courting death. At this moment, several angry roars rang out in unison. Then, 9 black-robed figures appeared and surrounded Lai Yen Jiufeng. These 9 black-clothed cultivators were the 9 Storm Imperial Guards who had previously fought with Nie Tian. Humph humph. Lai Yen Jiufeng swept his gaze across the 9 Storm Imperial Guards and chuckled. He said playfully, Finally, a few decent opponents have arrived. Make your move. He was extremely arrogant as he spoke loudly. You're courting death. The Storm Imperial Guards roared in unison and moved in unison. It was the same method they had used against Nie Tian. 9 gusts of wind swooped down towards Lai Yen Jiufeng like mad dragons. Too weak. Lai Yen Jiufeng sneered and did not even look at them. He thrust out his palm, and a wave of golden flames appeared, instantly turning the space into a sea of fire. Bang! 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 Immediately after, several muffled sounds rang out in the air. The 9 Storm Imperial Guards were sent flying, leaving bloody trails in the air. The 9 guards stabilized themselves, but they were covered in blood. There were several scorching wounds all over their bodies. They had been heavily injured by the golden flames. The 9 of them looked at Lai Yen Jiufeng with trembling eyes. They were extremely terrified. Lai Yen Jiufeng smiled cold and laughed arrogantly. The strongest alliance of the 9 great realms only has this much strength. How disappointing! How dare you behave so atrociously in the Wind and Rain Alliance? You're courting death. But just as he finished speaking, a deep voice resounded. Boom! Then, a huge palm shot towards Lai Yen Jiufeng like a collapsing mountain. It was the leader of the Storm Alliance, Nie Dao. The power of his furious palm was extremely terrifying. If it landed, it would definitely kill Lai Yen Jiufeng instantly. But in that moment of danger, space shook strangely. Boom! A terrifyingly huge palm appeared, blocking Nie Dao's berserk palm. The hand of the Netherworld Emperor. Nie Dao frowned and cried out when he saw the giant hand that had suddenly appeared in the air. The giant hand that had blocked his palm was the hand of the Netherworld Emperor. Alliance leader Nie, long time no see. At this time, a deep voice sounded. A dark figure appeared in the sky and stared darkly at Nie Dao. Tian Kuei. Nie Dao looked at the figure in the sky and immediately shouted the other's name. He never thought that the person who had come was Tian Kuei of the inescapable net. Lai Yen Jiufeng. At this time, Nie Tian's figure arrived. His eyes darkened when he saw Lai Yen Jiufeng. Then, His expression turned even uglier when he saw the people on the ground and the 9 bloody storm Imperial Guards. He knew that Lien Jiufeng would come to the Wind and Rain Alliance, but the latter's provocation was a little too arrogant. What he didn't expect was that Tian Kuei would also appear. Tian Kuei's appearance proved that the inescapable net valued 7 kills. It also proved that 7 kills was the killing body of the heaven-punishing demon heart. Tian Kuei, what is the meaning of this? Nie Dao calmed down and suppressed the anger in his heart. Then, he asked in a cold tone. Tian Kuei smiled faintly and said, Alliance leader Nie, His Highness was itching for a fight and injured the guards of the Wind and Rain Alliance. Please forgive him. Itching for a fight? Nie Dao's eyes darkened. Then, he glanced at the heavily injured guards and said, Tian Kuei, your inescapable net has injured so many people of the Wind and Rain Alliance. Do you think I'll let it go just because you say you're sorry? Tian Kuei smiled again and said, Alliance leader Nie, I've already apologized. What else do you want? Also, His Highness has been very merciful. Otherwise, these guards would have died a long time ago. The fact that they were injured by His Highness only means that they're too weak. They can't blame anyone else. Nie Dao's expression darkened. The suppressed anger in his heart was like a volcano that could erupt at any moment. The Wind and Rain Alliance had never been humiliated like this in its hundreds of thousands of years of existence. Grandfather. It was at this time that Nie Tian walked up and swept his gaze across Tian Kuei and Lien Jiufeng. He said indifferently, Forget it. There's no need to lower yourself to the level of 2 mad dogs. Tian Kuei's expression darkened when he heard Nie Tian's words. He said cold, Nie Tian, who are you calling mad dogs? Chapter 23:57. Tian Kuei stood in the sky, his eyes dark and murderous. Even his body was trembling slightly. He hadn't thought that Nie Tian would be so arrogant as to call him a mad dog right in front of him. Even Nie Dao wouldn't dare say something like that. But at this moment, Tian Kuei suppressed the anger in his heart. His expression was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. He growled, Nie Dao, if you hadn't sent 7 kills into the dark ocean black prison, would I have harmed your Wind and Cloud Alliance? Nie Dao's eyes focused in surprise. Tian Kuei already knew that 7 kills had been sent to the Dark Sea prison. This was something Nie Dao hadn't expected. Nie Tian was also taken aback, and a puzzled expression appeared on his face. So the Nets already knew that 7 kills was no longer in the Wind and Cloud Alliance. He was imprisoned in the Dark Sea prison. If that was the case, why did Lien Jiufeng let Nie Tian come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance? Wasn't this unnecessary? Nie Tian, I had you come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to meet someone, Tian Kuei said coldly. Nie Tian stilled and asked, Meet who? That person is right beside you. Tian Kuei smiled faintly and then locked his gaze on Nie Qingwan. Nie Qingwan. Nie Tian's eyes focused. Only now did he realize that the Nets had sent him back to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to meet Nie Qingwan. But hadn't Lien Jiufeng already seen Nie Qingwan before? Could it be that Nie Qingwan also had some special meaning to the inescapable net? So this girl is the person of the Nie family who has merged with the origin power. Lien Jiufeng looked darkly at Nie Qingwan and said darkly. He had met Nie Qingwan before, but he hadn't noticed her at the time and completely ignored her. If he had known that Nie Qingwan was the person who had merged with the origin power, he wouldn't have let Nie Tian come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. At the time, Lien Jiufeng had almost died at Jun Aoqing's hands. There was no way he would have noticed Nie Qingwan. Tian Kuei, what is the meaning of this? Nie Dao's expression darkened when he saw Tian Kuei and Lien Jiufeng staring at Nie Qingwan at the same time. He asked in a cold tone. It's simple. Tian Kuei smiled coldly and said, The Wind and Cloud Alliance has sent 7 kills to the Dark Ocean Dark Prison. Nie Tian must go there and rescue 7 kills. Moreover, this little girl who has fused with the early light realm must also go with us. Nie Dao, Nie Tian, and Nie Qingwan, the grandfather and granddaughter, were all stunned and their eyes trembled. It was reasonable for Tian Kuei to send Nie Tian to the Dark Sea Abyss to save 7 kills. But why must he bring Nie Qingwan along? Impossible! Nie Dao growled and said gravely, I will never let Nie Qingwan go to the Dark Sea Black Prison. Nie Dao knew very well how dangerous the Dark Sea Black Prison was. Even a monstrous genius like Nie Tian could easily never return. Nie Qingwan was just a little girl who had not experienced the ways of the world. How could Nie Dao let her go to the Dark Sea Black Prison? Alliance leader Nie, don't be in a hurry to refuse. Tian Kuei had already expected Nie Dao's reaction. He smiled faintly and said, This seat can give you a condition. You will definitely be satisfied. Nie Dao's face darkened and he said cold, Impossible means impossible. Tian Kuei laughed and said, If Miss Nie Qingwan is willing to go to the Dark Sea Black Prison, after she returns, the Nangong family will never mention the marriage to the Nie family again. This condition is tempting enough, right? Nie Dao's aged face suddenly trembled when he heard Tian Kuei's words, his expression shocked. He never imagined that Tian Kuei would know about the marriage between the Nangong family and the Nie family. Moreover, the condition Tian Kuei gave was indeed tempting. Right now, Nangong Duo is very pressing on this marriage matter, making Nie Dao feel extremely pressured. However, Nie Dao did not understand what ability Tian Kuei had to be able to decide the Nangong family's matters. Alliance leader Nie, are you doubting this seat's words? Tian Kuei saw what Nie Dao was thinking and said, This seat is not a good person, but this seat will definitely do what he says. Nie Dao looked at Tian Kuei, his eyes flickered slightly, and he actually started hesitating. I'm willing. But right at this time, Nie Qingwan spoke and agreed to Tian Kuei's suggestion. Nie Dao was stunned for a moment, his face ugly. Nie Qingwan agreed herself. This was something he did not expect. Grandpa, I will protect Qingwan. Nie Tian secretly transmitted his voice to Nie Dao and said with a firm tone. Nie Dao looked at Nie Tian and finally nodded. Tian Kuei personally came and specifically asked Nie Qingwan to follow him into the Dark Sea Black Prison. He was clearly determined to win. If Nie Dao did not agree, most likely Tian Kuei would use forceful methods. Nie Tian did not want to see that scene, so he agreed to Tian Kuei's condition. Nie Tian was very curious in his heart why the inescapable net must let Nie Qingwan participate in this matter. Alliance leader Nie, don't worry. This seat won't let a Nie family member take the risk alone. Tian Kuei smiled faintly when he saw that Nie Dao had finally agreed. He said, His Highness will also go to the Dark Sea Black Prison, and he will bring several powerful helpers. Nie Tian frowned and then looked at Lai Yin Jiufeng. He did not think that Lai Yin Jiufeng would go to the Dark Sea Black Prison with him. In order to save 7 kills, the inescapable net had even put Lai Yin Jiufeng in danger. This meant that 7 kills was even more important than Lai Yin Jiufeng. Nie Tian, you've already met the opponent I arranged for you, right? He will also go with us. Lai Yin Jiufeng looked at Nie Tian, the corner of his mouth twitching, and secretly transmitted. Nie Tian's eyes focused and immediately reacted. A name appeared in his mind, Nangong Lin. It was obvious that the person Lai Yin Jiufeng was talking about was Nangong Lin. Nie Tian's guess was correct. Lai Yin Jiufeng had arranged for Nangong Lin to attack him. Moreover, Nangong Lin would also go to the Dark Sea Black Prison with Nie Tian and the others. At this time, Nie Tian frowned, and his expression became strange. Nie Qingwan had merged with the Light Origin, and Nangong Lin had merged with the Lightning Origin. It was definitely not a coincidence that the inescapable net had arranged for Nie Qingwan and Nangong Lin to go to the Dark Sea Black Prison together. Nie Tian could vaguely feel that the inescapable net was brewing a scheme. QL11. As for what the scheme was, He could not guess for now. Lai Yin Jiufeng, no matter what you want to do, if you dare to harm Nie Qinhuan, I will kill you directly. Nie Tian looked at Lai Yin Jiufeng with cold eyes and said solemnly. Nie Tian had to ensure Nie Qinhuan's safety during the trip to the Dark Sea Black Prison. Since Alliance Master Nie has agreed, then it is settled. See you in 3 days at Demon Sealing City. Tian Kuei smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Wait! But at this time, Nie Tian's voice suddenly sounded. What? Is there something else? Tian Kuei's figure froze, and he turned to look at Nie Tian with a puzzled gaze. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Lord Tian Kuei, you have stated your conditions, but I have not. HM? Tian Kuei stilled, then sneered. Nie Tian, release 7 kills. This is the promise you made to the inescapable net. Do you have the right to state your conditions? The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and he said indifferently, Before I know 7 kills' true identity, I do not have the right to state my conditions. Chapter 23:58. Tian Kuei's figure froze in the air. When he heard Nie Tian's words, his eyes shook with shock and surprise. Nie Tian, what do you want to say? Tian Kuei forced himself to calm down and spoke gravely. He was extremely nervous when Nie Tian spoke of 7 kills' true identity. However, he did not believe that Nie Tian truly knew of 7 kills' true identity. Heaven-punishing demon heart, 3 transformations of the demon heart. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said calmly. Tian Kuei's brow furrowed when he heard these words. He froze on the spot. He had originally held onto a sliver of hope that Nie Tian's words were just a bluff. However, the words, heaven-punishing demon heart, 3 transformations of the demon heart, completely obliterated that sliver of hope. It was clear that Nie Tian already knew the truth. 7 kills was the demon heart slaughter physique. Lai Yin Jiufeng looked at Nie Tian but was not too surprised. Nie Tian had been to the Ninely demon realm before, so it was not strange that he knew of the heaven-punishing demon heart. With Nie Tian's intelligence, he could guess that 7 kills was the slaughter physique. Nie Tian smiled faintly when he saw Tian Kuei's reaction. He said, Lord Tian Kuei, can I state my conditions now? Tian Kuei's expression was murderous. He forcefully suppressed his anger and squeezed out, Speak! Thank you, Lord Tian Kuei. Nie Tian laughed. Then, his expression turned serious. He said, I will definitely save 7 kills, but I need a promise. After the Nether Emperor is revived, Cher will have nothing to do with the inescapable net and the Nether Emperor. Tian Kuei frowned when he heard Nie Tian's conditions. His gaze was slightly strange as he fell silent. Lord Tian Kuei, are you not willing to agree to my conditions? Nie Tian asked when he saw that Tian Kuei was silent. Tian Kuei's eyes flashed. He said, Nie Tian, since you already know of the heaven-punishing demon heart, you should know the relationship between Her Highness and the Nether Emperor. Once the Netherworld Emperor is resurrected, it's not up to me to decide whether Her Highness can leave. Even if Her Highness is willing to leave, she must obtain the permission of Lord Underworld Emperor. I'm giving you a promise now, but when that day comes, I won't be able to keep it. Are you willing to accept such a promise? Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect Tian Kuei to answer him like this. Indeed, once the Emperor of the Underworld was resurrected, the status of the Heavenly Chief would immediately drop. There were many things that Tian Chief could not decide. All right, I'll lower my requirements, Nie Tian said after some thought. I have to be there when the Underworld Emperor is resurrected. Is that okay? Tian Kuei's gaze turned cold as he looked at Nie Tian with an extremely strange expression. He did not know what the latter wanted to do. Sure. But he didn't hesitate and immediately agreed. Before the resurrection of the Underworld Emperor, Tian Kuei still had an absolute status. When the Underworld Emperor was resurrected, Tian Kuei and the others would definitely be present, so he was not afraid of Nie Tian playing tricks. Very good. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Lord Tian Kue, it's settled then. Let's meet again at Demon Sealing City in 3 days. Tian Kue nodded and left in a flash. Lien Jufeng glanced at Nie Tian with a strange expression, but he didn't say anything and left. Nie Tian looked in the direction that Tian Kue and Lien Jufeng had left with an ugly expression. This trip to the Dark Sea Black Prison was definitely going to be a dangerous one. Nie Tian, are you confident? Nie Dao had calmed down a lot. He looked at Nie Tian and asked, QL 11-inch at this point, is it even important whether I'm confident or not? Nie Tian smiled bitterly and helplessly. Nie Tian did not know what was inside the Dark Sea Black Prison. But he had to go this time. A while later, Nie Tian and the others returned to the Wind and Cloud Great Hall. Grandfather, where is Rushi? I want to see her. In the main hall, Nie Tian looked at Nie Dao and asked with a burning gaze. In the blink of an eye, he and Mo Rushi had been separated for several years. He missed her very much. He didn't know how strong Mo Rushi was now, and whether their child was doing well. Nie Tian, Miss Rushi is in the Nie family's ancestral grounds right now. I'm afraid you won't make it in time to see her. Nie Dao frowned and said with a troubled expression. Nie Tian's eyes flashed. He exhaled deeply and forced a smile. If that's the case, then forget it. He only needed to know that Mo Rushi was safe. There was no hurry for the two of them to meet. You still have 3 days, Nie Tian. You'd better take a good rest. I will send someone to send you to Demon Sealing City in 2 days. Nie Dao nodded slightly and said. All right, Nie Tian said, rising to his feet and preparing to leave. Nie Dao also stood up. The group walked out of the Wind and Cloud Great Hall. At that instant, Nie Dao suddenly glanced into the sky and frowned as if he had discovered something. An expert. Before he could finish his sentence, a black-robed figure appeared in the sky like a phantom. Nie Tian's eyes glistened as he glanced at the black-robed figure with a slightly surprised expression. He could sense that the aura of the person was extremely familiar. However, he could not recall where he had seen the person before. Who are you? What brings you to the Wind and Cloud Alliance? Nie Dao took a step forward and soared into the sky, facing the black-robed figure in the sky. Nie Tian, you're here indeed. However, the black-robed figure did not pay any attention to Nie Dao. His gaze was locked onto Nie Tian's figure as he charged toward Nie Tian. How dare you! Nie Dao let out a furious roar as his aura surged. Grandfather, don't attack! At that moment, Nie Tian's voice suddenly sounded. He instantly arrived beside Nie Dao and signaled him not to be rash. You know him? Nie Dao was startled. He slightly withdrew his aura, but still maintained his vigilance. The black-robed figure was very powerful, and was not any weaker than Nie Dao. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. He looked at the black-robed figure and said, Lord Heavenly Venerate Juing, it's been a while. Heavenly Venerate Juing. The black-robed figure was Heavenly Venerate Juing Fenghua. Several years ago, Nie Tian had participated in the Jiuying Forbidden Hunt. He only learned later that the place he went to was the ancestral land of the Chiwu clan, one of the 9 great clans. There, he met Heavenly Venerate Jiuying of the Chiwu clan, and even obtained the Darkness Origin Energy, the Heart of Darkness. When he went to see the Holy Mother of Jiuying, it was Heavenly Venerate Jiuying who led the way. Heavenly Venerate Jiuying's status in the sky of Jiuying was second only to the Holy Mother of Jiuying. He did not expect the Heavenly Venerate clan to appear here. Nie Tian, Jiuying Fenghua's expression was extremely grave. His eyes were filled with unconcealable grief. Lord Heavenly Venerate, did something happen? Nie Tian looked at Jiuying Fenghua with a frown and asked in surprise. Nie Tian, the reason I came to find you this time is to give you something, Jiuying Fenghua said in a deep voice. Nie Tian was startled. He had a feeling that something bad was about to happen. Jiuying Fenghua slowly raised his hand, and a black vortex appeared on his palm. Immediately, the surrounding space was enveloped by a terrifying aura of darkness. Soul of darkness! Tian cried out in shock when he saw the black vortex. The black vortex on Jiuying Fenghua's palm was one of the three dark subjects of the darkness origin energy, Soul of Darkness. Chapter 23:59. When Tian saw the Soul of Darkness surging on Jiuying Fenghua's palm, he immediately thought of something and his expression changed. The origin power of darkness, the dark abyss, consisted of the Soul of Darkness, the Hand of Darkness, and the Heart of Darkness. They were known as the three forms of darkness. Tian had merged with the Heart of Darkness, while the Soul of Darkness had been merged with the Holy Mother of Jiuying. The Soul of Darkness was the strongest of the three bodies of darkness. At this moment, Dark Soul was actually in the hands of Jiuying Fenghua. There was only one explanation: the Holy Mother of Jiuying was dead. When he thought of this, Tian's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't conceal the sorrow in his expression. He finally understood why Jiuying Fenghua had such a pained expression. Tian, looks like you've already guessed it. Seeing Tian's reaction, Jiuying Fenghua knew that the latter had already guessed everything. Before the Holy Mother died, she stored the Soul of Darkness in her demonic aura. He also instructed me to hand over Dark Soul to you. Tian's eyes trembled violently, unable to conceal the shock in his heart. Although he had already guessed everything, he was still shocked to hear Jiuying Fenghua say it. He had not expected the Holy Mother of Jiuying to really die. Dao watched from the side. When he heard Jiuying Fenghua mention the extreme demonic qi, he could not help but frown, his face full of surprise. Could this person be a member of the Qiwu clan? He guessed in his heart and was extremely shocked. The Qiwu family had disappeared from the 9 major realms for a long time, so they had thought that it had been destroyed. Who would have thought that there would be such a powerful person in this family? Lord Celestial, what's going on? Why did the Holy Mother suddenly fall? Tian became cold and asked in a deep voice. He remembered that when he left the sky of Jiuying, the Holy Mother of Jiuying was in good condition and showed no signs of weakening. Holy Mother Jiuying was a peak paramount god, and had incredible life force. She wasn't someone who could be killed so easily. It had only been a few years. How could the Holy Mother of Jiuying have fallen so suddenly? Tian, actually, ever since the Holy Mother merged with the Soul of Darkness, she has been suffering from the backlash of the Soul of Darkness. Jiuying Fenghua sighed and said, "When you saw her, she was almost unable to suppress the Dark Soul. Several months ago, for some reason, the Soul of Darkness suddenly went berserk, and its devouring power became much stronger. The Holy Mother held on for several months, but in the end, she still couldn't suppress Dark Soul. Before she died, she stored the Soul of Darkness in extreme demonic energy to prevent the devouring power of darkness from spreading. She said that in this world, only your martial body can withstand the Dark Soul. So he asked me to hand Dark Soul to you personally." With that, Jiuying raised his fiery palm and sent the Dark Soul to Tian. Tian looked at the black vortex in front of him and sensed the berserk energy within, feeling extremely shocked. He could indeed sense that the Dark Soul had become extremely berserk. Even under the suppression of the extreme demonic qi, that incomparably terrifying dark power was still extremely vast. The surrounding space was filled with a dense dark aura. That kind of vastness that could devour everything caused one to tremble. Tian was very puzzled. Why would the Soul of Darkness suddenly go berserk? Without hesitation, he released the crucible of hell with a thought and placed the Soul of Darkness into it. Even if he obtained the Soul of Darkness now, he could not fuse with it. The three bodies of the dark abyss were existences that reinforced and countered each other. Any two of them placed together would produce a huge repulsive force. If Tian were to fuse with the Soul of Darkness now, the repulsive force of the Soul of Darkness and the Heart of Darkness would be enough to instantly tear his body apart. If he wanted to fuse with the soul of darkness, he had to find the other of the three bodies of darkness, the hand of darkness. QL11. When the three bodies of darkness were placed together, they would achieve a perfect balance. Nia Tian, the soul of darkness has been handed to you. I'll take my leave. At this time, Jiuying Fenghua took his leave. Lord Celestial, take care, Nia Tian said solemnly. He did not urge him to stay. The Holy Mother of Jiuying was dead, and there would definitely be many things in Jiuying heaven waiting for Jiuying Fenghua to return. Moreover, Nia Tian did not have much time left. Seeing Jiuying Fenghua leave, Nia Tian's emotions calmed down a little. Nia Dao glanced at Nia Tian, but did not ask anything. Next, Nia Tian went to the small courtyard that Nia Dao had arranged for him and entered his own room. He could rest in the Wind and Cloud Alliance for 2 days. On the third day, he would head to the demon-sealed city. Fat, since the Holy Mother of Jiuying has already fused with the soul of darkness, why was she still devoured by it? In the room, Nia Tian could not hold back his curiosity and asked Fat Cat. Fat Cat's figure appeared, but her expression was not good. She looked at Nia Tian with a gloomy gaze and said, Nia Tian, actually, there are still many things that I have not told you about the origin source. I had intended to tell you when the time was right. Now that you have asked, I will tell you. Seeing Fat Cat's reaction, Nia Tian could not help but frown. He did not know what the latter wanted to say. The 9 elements of heaven and earth: metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, light, darkness. Fat Cat's expression was solemn as she said, each element has its own unique attribute. The toughness of metal, the vitality of wood, the tenacity of water, the heat of fire, the weight of earth, the swiftness of wind, the violence of thunder, the nothingness of light, and the chaos of darkness. The attributes of the 9 elements are all different. Each attribute has a different effect on a martialist. Martialists who can fuse with the origin source are extremely rare. They are all people with special bloodlines, but even for those with special bloodlines, it is extremely difficult to fuse with the origin source. After all, the origin source is an external force for martialists. Moreover, it is an abnormally strong external force. It has a huge impact on the martialist's martial body. Nia Tian nodded slightly. He understood what Fat Cat was saying. The little Fat Cat looked at Nia Tian with a burning gaze and continued, even if it's wood or earth elemental essences, this kind of relatively gentle origin power will still have a great impact on martial practitioners. Take you for example. Although you have fused with the Terra Source, while the Terra Source provides you with a strong life force, it also suppresses your demonic essence. You must have felt this. When you release the Godfiend essence of the Godfiend embryo, you must be suppressed by the Terra Source, right? Nia Tian's expression changed slightly when he heard Fat Cat's words, and he nodded solemnly. Fat Cat was right. He could indeed feel that the Terra Source had a certain degree of suppression on his demonic essence and Godfiend embryo. Sometimes, when his martial body was at its limit, he could clearly feel the power of the heart of darkness stirring. It was like a wild beast waiting for an opportunity, waiting for him to be at his weakest moment before devouring him. He had thought that this feeling was only temporary because he had not completely fused with the origin source. Therefore, he had not mentioned it. Chapter 2360. In the room, Nia Tian looked a little surprised. Fat, you mean to say that the Holy Mother of Jiuying was devoured by the suppressive power of the soul of darkness? Yes. Little Fat Cat nodded and said, the suppressive power of the darkness source is the strongest amongst the 9 great origins, and the soul of darkness is the strongest of the 3 dark bodies. Therefore, the suppressive power of the Holy Mother of Jiuying is very strong. Even though she is a pinnacle paramount god, she cannot resist this suppressive power. So that's how it is. Nia Tian's eyes narrowed, and he could not help but gasp. Does that mean that I will also have to withstand the powerful suppressive power of the origin in the future? Fat Cat nodded with a bitter smile, but then said, You have only fused with the power of the origin for a short time. The suppressive power of the origin is a gradual process. Moreover, your martial body is far stronger than ordinary people. Therefore, you are absolutely safe for now. Hearing Fat Cat's words, Nye Tian let out a deep breath and relaxed a little. However, there's one thing that I can't help but worry about. Just then, little Fat Cat furrowed its brows with a worried expression. Nye Tian was stunned. He looked at Fat Cat, not knowing what the latter was worried about. Fat Cat sighed softly. The soul of darkness has just devoured the power of the Holy Mother of Jiuying. It must have absorbed a lot of extreme devil qi. I am not sure what effect this will have on the soul of darkness. Just now, I felt that the soul of darkness is slowly becoming more violent. If this situation continues, I am afraid that your furnace of hell will not be able to withstand the power of the soul of darkness. There is even a possibility that the soul of darkness will devour you directly. Nye Tian's expression, which had just relaxed a bit, grew grim again. It turned out that the soul of darkness was not absolutely safe in his hands. When the soul of darkness completely exploded, it would be a fatal crisis for him. Don't worry too much. Maybe Dark Soul will slowly stabilize. Fat Cat didn't want Nye Tian to worry too much, so she forced a smile and said, Yes. Nye Tian nodded helplessly. Anyway, Dark Soul was already in his body. He could only take it one step at a time. Right now, the most important thing was to enter the Dark Sea prison and save 7 kills. Nye Tian was very worried about the trip to Darkness Prison, but at the same time, he was also a little excited. This was because he knew that the more dangerous a place was, the greater the opportunities would be. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. On the 3rd day, under Nye Dao's arrangements, Nye Tian and the others set off for Demon Ceiling City on Flying Mount. About half a day later, they arrived above Demon Ceiling City. Nye Tian, Jun Aoqing, and Nye Qingwan jumped off their flying mounts and entered Demon Ceiling City. The flying mounts above their heads flapped their wings and left, disappearing in the blink of an eye. As soon as the 3 arrived at Demon Ceiling City, Nye Tian felt a familiar presence. A moment later, Lai Yin Jiufeng and the others appeared. Nye Tian frowned when he saw 2 figures behind Lai Yin Jiufeng. These 2 figures were not unfamiliar to him. One was Nangong Lin, whom he had met not long ago. The other was someone he had met at the Evil Peak Sword competition, Xianyuan Yunsong. Xianyuan Yunsong was a member of the Xianyuan family. Back at the Evil Peak Sword competition, he had been defeated by Nye Tian. Later on, he had become Nye Tian's helper. Moreover, Nye Tian knew that Xianyuan Yunsong was a martial practitioner who had merged with the power of origin. Nye Tian, are you surprised to see the 2 people behind me? Lai Yin Jiufeng walked over with a faint smile on his face. I am very surprised. Nye Tian laughed. Then, his gaze swept across Nangong Lin and Xianyuan Yunsong. Nangong Lin, Xianyuan Yunsong, and Nye Qingwan were all people who had merged with the power of origin. Lai Yin Jiufeng clearly had a goal in gathering them together. But for now, Nye Tian couldn't guess what Lai Yin Jiufeng's goal was. Nye Tian, you are a smart person, but sometimes being too smart is a bad thing. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly and said to Nye Tian. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, but he didn't deny it. He didn't understand why Lai Yin Jiufeng would suddenly say such a strange thing. What did he mean? Nye Tian. Xianyuan Yunsong smiled and greeted Nye Tian respectfully when he saw him again. He had witnessed Nye Tian's strength during the Evil Peak Sword competition. Not only did he fear him, but he also admired him a little. Xianyuan Yunsong, you've become stronger. Nye Tian looked at Xianyuan Yunsong and smiled faintly. He remembered that Xianyuan Yunsong had been an early paramount god during the Evil Peak sword competition. But now, he was a mid-stage paramount god, and his sword Dao had reached the mid-level of sword martial unity. His strength was exactly the same as Nie Tian's. But Xianyuan Yunsong's battle prowess was far inferior to Nie Tian's. Xianyuan Yunsong stared at Nie Tian in shock. He hadn't thought that Nie Tian's strength would increase so much. "Miss, you must be Nie Qingwan of the Nie family." Nangong Lin's voice rang out. His purple eyes shone with a lascivious light as they wandered around Nie Qingwan's body. It was as if he wanted to look her up and down. "Who are you? I don't know you." Nie Qingwan glanced at Nangong Lin and said coldly. She actually knew Nangong Lin, but she didn't want to talk to him. "Miss Qingwan, have you forgotten? I paid a visit to the Wind and Cloud Alliance a few years ago. We've already met then." Nangong Lin's eyes shone with an impure light. At that time, Miss Qingwan was only in her teens. She was still a child. "I didn't expect Miss Qingwan to become a young lady after not seeing her for a few years. It seems that I won't have to wait too long. I'll be able to marry Miss Qingwan soon." "Nangong Lin, you're talking nonsense. Who wants to marry you?" Nie Qingwan glared at Nangong Lin and scolded him. Her pretty face was flushed red. "Miss Qingwan, don't you know?" Nangong Lin wasn't angry at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Our marriage was decided by the ancestors of the Nangong family and the Nie family. Miss Qingwan can't refuse. Even the leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance can only accept it." As he spoke, Nangong Lin walked forward and approached Nie Qingwan step by step. "Stay away from her." However, at this moment, a low voice was heard. It was filled with a cold, murderous intent. Nie Tian stared at Nangong Lin with murderous eyes and said coldly, "Nangong Lin, if you dare to take even half a step closer, I'll kill you." Nangong Lin felt the murderous intent in Nie Tian's eyes. He stopped for a moment and his face darkened. Then, he laughed and said, "Nie Tian, do you think you can kill me with your strength?" His cold laughter was extremely arrogant. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a shadow disappeared from the space. "You're courting death." In the next moment, a cold shout came from the void. Chapter 2361. Boom! The power of time and space crashed down like a raging wave. The surrounding space trembled and the ground cracked. "Ah!" Nangong Lin instantly felt the terrifying pressure of time and space. He was so scared that his face turned pale and he screamed. However, in the next moment, after the space-time sword shadow descended, it disappeared. A glaring sword mark appeared on Nangong Lin's face. At the same time, Jun Aoqing appeared and stood beside Nie Tian. Her beautiful eyes were calm as if nothing had happened. Nie Tian glanced at Jun Aoqing, the corner of his mouth slightly smiling. Jun Aoqing's attack was so fast that Nie Tian didn't even have time to stop her. Fortunately, Jun Aoqing knew how to control her strength and didn't kill Nangong Lin. She only left a sword mark on his face. In fact, at that moment, if Jun Aoqing wanted to, Nangong Lin would already be a corpse. Jun Aoqing's space-time sword intent was too terrifying. Her sword was invisible and traceless. The sword shadow tore through the void. No one could avoid it. Even if it was Nangong Lin, he would definitely die if he was caught off guard. Xianyuan Yunsong was completely stunned. After a long time, he took a deep breath and couldn't say anything. He had been focusing on Nie Tian. The two girls next to him didn't have much strength. At this moment, he realized that Jun Aoqing was a more terrifying swordsman than Nie Tian. This was the first time Xianyuan Yunsong had seen a space-time swordsman. Lian Zhufeng didn't have much of a reaction. He already knew what Jun Aoqing was capable of. He even almost died in her hand. Jun Aoqing's attack was indeed strange, but it also had a fatal weakness. If the opponent was always in a defensive state, it would be very difficult for her space-time sword intent to kill a true expert. For anyone, the scariest thing about June Ouching was the first time she made her move. That unguarded sword was enough to kill someone much stronger than her. Damn it! At this moment, Nangong Lin finally reacted. His pale face instantly turned into rage as he roared, "How dare you leave a sword mark on my face!" The sword mark was a great humiliation. Even if Nangong Lin was not a swordsman, he understood this very well. He had never imagined that June Ouching would humiliate him in front of so many people instead of killing him. The sword mark is just a reminder. June Ouching looked at Nangong Lin cold and said, "I'll remember this for you. Don't have any ideas about Nye Qingwan again." "You!" Nangong Lin's eyes darkened, and his purple eyes instantly became bloodshot. He was like a wild beast that was about to go berserk in the next moment. "Enough!" But at this moment, Lai Yin Jiufeng growled and stared at Nangong Ling darkly. He said, "Nangong Ling, remember why you came here." "Your Royal Highness, this woman." Nangong Lin covered the sword wound on his face, and his eyes were still filled with anger. "I said that's enough." Lai Yin Jiufeng's expression instantly turned cold. He said, "This matter ends here. Don't provoke Nye Qingwan again." Nangong Lin looked at Lai Yin Jiufeng in shock, but when he felt the coldness in the latter's eyes, he immediately lowered his head and nodded in agreement. Nye Tian couldn't help but focus when he saw this. Nangong Lin was very strong. Even if he was slightly weaker than Lai Yin Jiufeng, he wasn't much weaker. Why was Nangong Lin so afraid of Lai Yin Jiufeng? What puzzled him even more was that Lai Yin Jiufeng seemed to have absolute control over Nangong Lin and Xianyuan Yunsong. The latter two were like Lai Yin Jiufeng's subordinate. Nangong Lin and Xianyuan Yunsong were both members of the 9 great families. What right did Lai Yin Jiufeng have to control them? "Let's go," Lai Yin Jiufeng said without delay. Then, he took out the Realm Divine boat and opened it, gesturing for everyone to enter. Nangong Lin and Xianyuan Yunsong entered first, followed by Nye Tian and the others. Lai Yin Jiufeng was the last to enter. The Realm Divine boat could travel between realms. It was the most common form of transportation between realms. The Dark Sea Black Prison was a small realm that was outside of the 9 great realms. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian felt the Realm Divine boat sway slightly. He seemed to have arrived in another world. The Realm Divine boat opened again, and everyone walked out. At this time, a completely unfamiliar world appeared in front of Nye Tian and the others. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the light was dim. It gave off an extremely oppressive feeling. Below them was a boundless sea of darkness. Perhaps it was because the space here was dark, or the sea was black to begin with, but the entire sea was pitch black. It gave off a thick aura of darkness. Nye Tian could vaguely feel an extremely dark power filling the space here. This dark power was vast and boundless. As it flowed through the space, it actually caused the devil Yuan in his body to become restless. It seemed to have sensed something. "Nye Tian, the structure of space here is strange." At this time, June Ouching suddenly spoke. She looked into the void as if she had sensed something. Nye Tian frowned and activated the holographic divine glyph. He carefully felt the space around him. His expression changed. As expected, the structure of space was strange. Under normal circumstances, space was straight and flat, maintaining a balanced state of existence. However, such a space was distorted. Space was not straight, but an extremely strange curved surface. It was even a little spiral, as if it was highly compressed space. As expected of the space-time swordsman. "You even sense this." At this time, Lai Yin Jiufeng laughed and said, "The Dark Sea Black Prison is outside of the 9 great realms. It is located at the intersection of the 9 great realms. This space is very small. It's only about 5,000 kilometers in diameter. The space here is compressed by the 9 great realms, so the structure of space here is very strange. It is curved and even spiral." It is because of this strange structure that the dark sea black prison is a place of death that can only be entered and not left. After saying this, Lai Yen Jiufeng smiled faintly and said, "Do you realize how dangerous you are now?" Eyebrows furrowed, Nie Tian examined his surroundings with rapt attention, and soon discovered something unusual. QL11 Lai Yen Jiufeng was right. The dark sea black prison could only be entered and not left. Because of the unique structure of space here, when people entered the dark sea black prison, they entered through the curved space. But if they wanted to leave, they had to go against the curved space. Even a realm divine boat could not resist the spatial pressure. If they forced their way out, it was very likely that the realm divine boat would be torn apart by the curved space. Understanding this, Nie Tian's expression couldn't help but turn ugly. He seemed to have come to a land of despair. The others also had ugly expressions. They were clearly worried about something. Roar, roar, roar. All of a sudden, a shrill cry came from the sky. It sounded like a gigantic beast. Chapter 2362. What's that? Nie Qingwan was the first to exclaim when she saw the huge black figure. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he stared at the huge black figure. The black figure was huge. It was at least 1,000 meters long and had 4 black wings on its back. They looked like they were made of steel and looked extremely lethal. The black figure did not look like a bird. It looked like a violent ape. It was a black violent ape with 2 pairs of black wings. That's the Darkwing Guardian, Lai Yen Jiufeng exclaimed. Everyone, be careful. This beast is very strong. It's comparable to a human powerhouse at the peak of the supreme god level. Everyone's eyes widened. They did not expect this clumsy beast to be so strong. Roar! At that moment, the dozens of Darkwing Guardian deities roared in unison and swooped down like black lightning toward Nie Tian and the others. The Darkwing Guardian deities were huge and strong. They were also astonishingly fast. The space shook under the impact of the dozens of Darkwing Guardian deities, as if it was about to be torn apart. Humph! I'd like to see how strong this black beast is. Nangong Ling sneered. His eyes were cold as he took a step forward and was the first to attack. He immediately threw a punch, and the power of purple lightning whizzed out like a wild snake and charged straight at a Darkwing Guardian King Kong. Boom! The violent purple lightning was like wind and lightning. It arrived in an instant and directly bombarded a Darkwing Guardian beast. However, it only left a small wound on its body. Huh! Nie Tian frowned slightly when he saw this. He was quite surprised. He did not like Nangong Ling, but he could not deny the latter's strength. Nangong Ling was a martial artist who had fused with the Thunder Origin, the Purple Thunder 9 Howls. His attack power was extremely strong. The violent power of purple lightning struck the Darkwing Guardian deity's body, but it felt like it was scratching an itch. The Darkwing Guardian deity's body was ridiculously strong. This beast's body is so strong. Nangong Ling was shocked. He let out a strange cry and quickly retreated with a horrified expression. Roar! At this moment, a dark wing Vajra had already rushed over. With a roar, its entire body released a majestic and boundless ruthless aura. Its huge ape arm waved downwards and a black light appeared. It actually attacked Nie Qingwan directly. Be careful! Nie Tian screamed when he saw this. He moved and slashed with his sword. Boom! The sword's shadow and the black light collided in midair, stirring up a terrifying shockwave that dispersed in the air. Nie Tian was hit by the shockwave and his figure retreated slightly before he steadied himself. The collision this time made him realize that the Darkwing Guardian King Kong's battle prowess was indeed terrifying. It was so terrifying that it could instantly kill an ordinary peak paramount god. How can he be this strong? Lai Yen Jiufeng exclaimed in confusion. His eyes trembled slightly. The Darkwing Guardian King Kong's strength had exceeded his expectations. It was much stronger than he had expected. Roar! 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 In the next moment, Even more dark-winged guardian kings rushed over. Their violent auras combined and surged forward like a tsunami. Jun Aoqing, take Qingwan and retreat. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He transmitted his voice to Jun Aoqing. The latter acknowledged his order and retreated with Nie Qingwan. Given Jun Aoqing's strength, it would be difficult for her to kill the dark-winged guardian King Kong. However, her figure was agile. Even in the distorted space, she could still move freely. Protecting herself was not a problem. 8 Desolation Sword. Nie Tian's figure stood in the air. When he saw the dark-winged guardian king charging at him, he didn't hesitate and slashed down with the Starlight Heavenly Slash. The sword's shadow fell like a waterfall. Boom! The moment the sword's shadow fell, it bombarded the body of a dark-winged guardian King Kong, leaving a 10-meter-long wound. Blood immediately spurted out. Nie Tian had used the sword intent of the demon gods in this attack, but it still failed to kill the dark-winged guardian King Kong. However, the damage caused by the sword's shadow was much more terrifying than Nangong Ling's purple lightning. Purple Thunder Dragon. Nangong Ling was unconvinced when he saw this. He roared and punched out. The power of purple lightning rushed out and condensed into a terrifying purple thunder dragon in the air. Boom! The purple thunder dragon rushed down and crashed into the shoulder of a dark-winged guardian King Kong. Crash! In the next moment, a terrifying sound was heard. Half of the dark-winged guardian King Kong's arm was torn off by the purple thunder dragon. Blood gushed out and the dark-winged guardian King Kong's body was dyed dark red. Nangong Ling had used all his strength in this punch, but he only managed to injure the dark-winged guardian King Kong. This showed how monstrous the dark-winged guardian King Kong's bestial body was. Boom! At this time, Lian Jiufeng also made his move. He slammed his palm down, and the power of golden flames spread into a sea of fire, engulfing one of the dark-winged guardian kings. However, the dark-winged guardian King Kong's body shook, and it pounced forward. The power of golden flames around it was actually shaken off. What a monstrous beast! Lian Jiufeng was stunned. Then, his figure flickered, and he retreated 1,000 meters. However, at this time, dozens of dark-winged guardian kings had already rushed over. They were only 1,000 meters away from Nie Tian and the others. The violent aura they exuded was terrifying. Roar! 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 3 dark-winged guardian kings moved at the same time, and they charged at Nie Tian from 3 different directions. They were surrounded by a terrifying black aura, and they looked like 3 moving black mountains. Star Slash! At this moment, Nie Tian no longer held back. He roared, and sword intent surged from his body. The fiend god's sword intent appeared, and he executed his strongest move, the Star Heavenly Slash. Pft! The sword's shadows were extremely sharp. Everywhere they passed, a bloody light appeared. A mysterious winged guardian deity was actually directly chopped into 2. The incomparably bloody scene caused everyone to tremble, and their expressions were filled with terror. Nie Tian's sword strike was too terrifying. It killed a dark-winged guardian king in 1 strike. Boom! Boom! However, at that very moment, the other 2 dark-winged Vajra charged towards Nie Tian at the same time, their black auras as sharp blades. Lian Jiufeng and Nangong Lin watched from the side. They had no intention of interfering. Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and his sword intent soared to the extreme. He was like a giant sword that stood between heaven and earth. He had no way out in this situation. He could only fight with his life on the line. QL 11-inch Nie Tian. Jun Aoqing's voice rang out at this moment. Nie Tian felt a space-time sword shadow appear behind him. He immediately understood and entered the space-time sword shadow. His figure disappeared into thin air along with the space-time sword shadow. Bang! In the next moment, the 2 black rays collided with each other. There was a muffled sound like metal colliding with stone. Nie Tian's figure appeared again. This time, he was next to Jun Aoqing, who was several thousand meters away. Lai Yin Jiufeng and the others were shocked. Chapter 2363. Nie Tian stood in the sky and looked playfully at Lai Yin Jiufeng and the others. Lai Yin Jiufeng and the others hadn't helped him earlier, so he naturally wouldn't help them now. Moreover, he knew that Lai Yin Jiufeng wasn't as weak as he appeared to be. He was definitely hiding a terrifying trump card. He could use these profound wing vajra to test Lai Yin Jiufeng's strength. The profound wing vajra glared coldly at Lai Yin Jiufeng, Nangong Lin, and Xianyuan Yunsong like hungry wolves. Roar! At this moment, the profound wing vajra roared in unison. Their roars shook the sky, and a violent aura erupted from them. In the next instant, dozens of profound wing vajra charged out at the same time. They were like dozens of black lightning bolts. Xianyuan Yunsong was extremely fast. He took a step forward and shot into the sky. He was actually the first to escape the profound wing vajra's encirclement. His body had merged with the wind origin energy, so he was much faster than other martial practitioners of the same level. Just by relying on speed, he could protect himself. However, Lai Yin Jiufeng and Nangong Lin were in danger. They weren't as fast as Xianyuan Yunsong. Purple thunder 9 roars, 9 heavens lightning. Nangong Lin couldn't hold back any longer when he saw the profound wing vajra getting closer and closer. He growled, and 9 bolts of purple lightning surged out of his body. They shot into the sky like giant dragons. Kaboom! The 9 bolts of purple lightning roared in the sky. It was as if the world itself was trembling. Bang! 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 Immediately after, the 9 bolts of purple lightning struck the 9-headed mysterious winged guardian King Kong and sent it flying. Roar! At the same time, a ball of fire appeared behind Lai Yin Jiufeng and charged straight at the profound wing vajra. Boom! A profound wing vajra was set ablaze wherever the fire passed. It let out a terrible roar as its enormous body fell to the ground like a mountain. Lai Yin Jiufeng and Nangong Lin charged out of the encirclement and retreated 10,000 meters away. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he saw their method. Lai Yin Jiufeng's strength was within his expectations, but Nangong Lin's strength had exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. That move, lightning strikes the 9th heaven, instantly severely injured the 9-headed mysterious winged vajra. It was too terrifying. This guy is so strange. He's actually able to unleash the true power of origin energy. Right at this moment, the fat cat's voice rang out in shock. Fat, what do you mean? Nie Tian couldn't help but ask. Nie Tian, you have to be careful of this person called Nangong Lin. After he fused with the Purple Thunder 9 roars, he was actually able to wield the power of the Purple Thunder 9 roars to such an extent. It's really terrifying. Fat Cat did not answer Nie Tian's question, but instead reminded him. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and scanned Nangong Lin with his divine sense. He was even more puzzled. Logically speaking, the Purple Thunder 9 roars that Nangong Lin had merged with was only a small portion of the thunder origin source. How could it erupt with such terrifying power? But Nie Tian was someone who had merged with the Heart of Darkness. The Heart of Darkness was almost 1/3 of the darkness origin source. However, he could not even use the power of the Heart of Darkness, much less cause it to erupt with great power. Why was there such a huge difference between people who had merged with the origin source at the same time? Could it be that I have merged with the Heart of Darkness for too short a period of time? Nie Tian frowned as he wondered in his heart. Nangong Lin should have merged with the Purple Thunder 9 roars for a very long time, at least tens of thousands of years. But Nie Tian had only merged with the Heart of Darkness for a few years. Right now, he could not wield the power of the Heart of Darkness at all. At this time, Lai Yin Jiufeng looked at Nie Tian and said cold, Nie Tian, do you want to continue watching? You two are so strong. Do you need me to take action? Nie Tian laughed and replied indifferently. Lai Yin Jiufeng's eyes were gloomy, but there was nothing he could do. On the other side, Nangong Lin seemed to have noticed something and said in surprise, "Look, Your Highness. These beasts seem to have calmed down." Lai Yin Jiufeng was surprised. Then, he realized that the remaining 20 or so profound transformation Vajra really did seem to have calmed down. Nie Tian also noticed that something was wrong. His eyes focused slightly. At this time, the 20 or so profound transformation Vajra were lying in the air. They looked very docile, and their violent auras were withdrawn. Even their eyes had softened. "Your Highness, what is going on?" Nangong Lin asked in shock. "Are these beasts afraid?" Lai Yin Jiufeng frowned deeply and said nothing. He was extremely nervous, and he did not dare to relax in the slightest. He knew that the profound wing Vajra was not the kind of divine beast that would be afraid. These beasts were bloodthirsty and violent. The more intense the battle, the more their bloodthirsty nature would be stimulated. Under normal circumstances, the death of a few profound wing Vajra would only make them more violent. They would not be as calm as they were now. Someone is controlling them. Lai Yin Jiufeng suddenly realized what was going on. His expression changed abruptly. Nie Tian also understood what was going on. He could not help but look worried. These profound wing Vajra had suddenly calmed down. Someone must be controlling them. The person behind this must be very powerful to be able to control dozens of profound wing Vajra at the same time. He was definitely a very skilled beast-taming master. QL11 Nie Tian and the others looked into the air at the same time. They wanted to find the person hiding in the air. Unfortunately, they could not sense anything. There was no aura in the air at all. It was at this moment the largest profound wing Vajra suddenly moved. It stood up and walked toward them like a giant. Nie Tian frowned. His nerves were tense and his heart was in his throat. "Don't be nervous." A deep voice resounded in the air. It sounded a little ethereal, but it was real. "Who is it? Come out." Lai Yin Jiufeng growled. His eyes were as cold as ice. "Friends, welcome to the Dark Sea Hell." The profound wing Vajra stopped moving. The deep voice resounded, and a figure appeared above the profound wing Vajra's head. The eyes of Nie Tian and the others shook violently. They all locked onto the figure. Although they were far away, Nie Tian could still see the person's face clearly. It was a white-haired old man. Although his face was old, his eyes were sharp like the cold stars in the night sky. They were intimidating. It was obvious that the beast-taming master controlling the profound wing Vajra was this white-haired old man. The reason why Nie Tian and the others could not sense his existence was not because he was skilled in hiding. It was because his aura was completely covered by the profound wing Vajra's aura. Even if he showed himself, Nie Tian and the others still could not sense his aura. "Who are you?" Lai Yin Jiufeng asked. His voice was cold, but it was very polite. "I is just a nobody. You can call me spiritualist," the white-haired old man said indifferently with a strange smile. The white-haired old man spoke with a strange smile on his face. He then said, "On the other hand, your strength has truly amazed me." The self-proclaimed spiritualist old man swept his gaze across everyone. There was a hint of undetectable hostility in his eyes. Chapter 2364. The spiritualist's expression was cold. His voice was calm, but it was filled with extreme arrogance. It was as if he already had the lives of Nie Tian and the others in his hands. If he wanted Nie Tian and the others to live, then Nie Tian and the others would live. If not, then Nie Tian and the others must die. Lai Yin Jiufeng frowned. His expression was dark as he replied in a cold voice, "Sir, are you that confident that you can kill us?" The spiritualist looked at Lai Yin Jiufeng disdainfully and said, "Young man, don't think that you're great just because you killed a few profound wing Vajras. It is no exaggeration to say that if I really wanted to kill you, all of you would be corpses by now. Is that so?" The corner of Lai Yin Jiufeng's mouth twitched and his eyes were dark. Nye Tian, this guy is very strong. He has the strength to kill you. Nye Tian looked at the spiritualist from afar, and Fat Cat's voice rang in his mind. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed that the spiritualist was not just skilled in taming beasts. His own strength was not to be underestimated. Mr. Spiritualist, there is no need to test me. Nye Tian thought for a moment, took a step forward and said, "Tell me your true goal." The spiritualist looked around when he heard Nye Tian speak. A strange look appeared in his eyes, and then he smiled and said, "Young man, do you really think that I won't kill you since you're so confident?" Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "You wanted to kill us just now, but you've given up on the idea now. Otherwise, you wouldn't have suddenly stopped and appeared to talk to us." The spiritualist's eyes focused slightly, and he could not hide his surprise. He didn't think that Nye Tian was so smart that he saw through everything with a glance. Just now, he really did want to kill Nye Tian and the others because Nye Tian and the others had invaded his territory. But now, he dispelled the thought of killing. That was because he had already made better arrangements for Nye Tian and the others. In other words, he wanted to make a deal with Nye Tian and the others. "Young man, it seems that not only are you talented and powerful, but your temperament is also stronger than the average person." The spiritualist's gaze locked onto Nye Tian as he smiled faintly. "Mr. Spiritualist, you don't have to be so polite. Just tell us what you want us to do," Nye Tian said straightforwardly. "Very well." The spiritualist was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, "Then, please follow me." Nye Tian's gaze sharpened. He did not think much of it and prepared to leave with the spiritualist. "Wait!" But at this moment, Lien Jiufeng growled and stared at Nye Tian. He said solemnly, "Nye Tian, we don't know where he came from, and he doesn't come with good intentions. We cannot leave with him." Nye Tian smiled slightly and said, "Lien Jiufeng, do you think we have a choice right now?" How could he not see that Lien Jiufeng was very angry right now, not because of the spiritualist, but because Nye Tian was making the decision for him? Lien Jiufeng felt that he was the leader of this trip to Dark Sea Hell and had the absolute right to decide. But now, the person making the decision was Nye Tian. He was naturally displeased. Boom! At this moment, the spirit controller suddenly moved, and a terrible momentum surged around him. It was as heavy and majestic as a mountain, and the surrounding space was surging. So strong. Everyone was shocked when they saw this scene, and their faces were filled with shock. They did not expect the spiritualist to be this strong. Just this aura alone showed that the spiritualist was an expert close to the peak of the divine realm. "Can we leave now?" Then, the spiritualist withdrew his aura and said coldly. It was obvious that he had revealed his strength to intimidate Lien Jiufeng and the others. He wanted them to know that Nye Tian's choice was right. "Your Highness, let's go with this, Mr." Nangong Lin walked up to Lien Jiufeng and said carefully. Lien Jiufeng's face was tense. He looked very embarrassed, but he nodded in the end. Nye Tian and the others stepped onto the profound wing Vajra and followed the spiritualist. They soon arrived above an island. Is this an island? Everyone looked at the island in the sea below and felt puzzled. The island below them was several hundred kilometers wide. It was surrounded by thick walls, and they could clearly see the majestic buildings on the island. Rather than calling it an island, it was more appropriate to call it a city. "Follow I." The spiritualist glanced at everyone and smiled. Then, he leaped down. Nye Tian and the others followed the spiritualist closely. They arrived at a forest on the outskirts of the island. The profound wing Vajra in the sky flapped its wings and flew away. It seemed to be hiding. "Mr. Spiritualist, what is this place?" Nye Tian asked as he followed behind the spiritualist. "The seventh major city of the Dark Sea Abyss Prison." The spiritualist smiled and led Nye Tian and the others to a majestic mansion on the island. "This is the seventh major city's City Lord Mansion," the spiritualist said and walked into the mansion. QL11 Nye Tian and the others were confused, but they still followed the spiritualist. A moment later, they arrived at the main hall of the City Lord Mansion. "Someone, bring Commander Yang Qi here," the spiritualist shouted as he sat on the main seat. "Yes, City Lord." A response was heard from outside the main hall before a figure rushed out. Nye Tian and the others were stunned. They finally realized that the spiritualist was the City Lord of the 7th Major City. "So you're the City Lord of the 7th Major City. Please excuse me." Nye Tian smiled faintly and asked, "City Lord, we've just arrived at the Dark Sea Abyss prison, so we're unfamiliar with everything here. Could you please tell us about the situation in the Dark Sea Abyss prison, sir?" The spiritualist picked up a cup of tea and took a sip. He glanced at Nye Tian and said, "Nye Tian, are you trying to get information out of I?" Nye Tian and the others had already introduced themselves on the way to the 7th Major City. "City Lord, why would you say that?" Nye Tian was stunned at first before he laughed. He had only asked a casual question, but the spiritualist had said that. He was puzzled. The spiritualist smiled faintly and put down the cup in his hand. He said, "There are two types of people who come to the Dark Sea Abyss prison. The first type are extremely cruel people who are exiled to the Dark Sea Abyss prison. These people will be locked up immediately after entering the Dark Sea Abyss prison. The other type are here to save people. These people will be killed immediately after entering the Dark Sea Abyss prison. You don't have any shackles on your bodies, so you're obviously the second type. However, the Dark Sea Abyss prison is a death cage that only allows people to enter but not leave. Therefore, since you've come to the territory under the jurisdiction of the 7th Major City, of course I'll have to kill you." Everyone's eyes darkened when they heard the spiritualist's words. Their faces were filled with fear. It seemed that the spiritualist had already figured out that they had come to the Dark Sea Abyss prison to save people. Nye Tian's reaction was very calm as he said, "City Lord, why did you suddenly stop killing us?" Chapter 2365. Nye Tian looked at the spiritualist with a frown. The spiritualist knew that they had come to the Dark Sea Onyx Penitentiary to rescue people, but he hadn't killed them. Clearly, he had other plans. Yang Qi wasn't sure what exactly the spiritualist wanted them to do. "City Magistrate." At this moment, a voice as majestic as a mountain rang out, following which a tall and sturdy figure stepped into the hall. Nye Tian looked at the man, who had a full beard. His facial features were resolute, and his eyes were blazing, giving him a very violent feeling. He wasn't very old, but was shockingly strong. He was obviously a peak paramount god. "Ladies and gentlemen," the spiritualist said, chuckling, "allow me to introduce you. This is Yang Qi, the commandant of the 7th Major City." Nye Tian and the others looked Yang Qi up and down, but didn't say anything. "What do you think of these people, Yang Qi?" the spiritualist said with a faint smile. Yang Qi's gaze swept over Nye Tian and the others one by one, his brows knitted tighter and tighter. In the end, even the beard on his face was trembling. Clearly, he wasn't very pleased with Nye Tian and the others. "City Lord, please forgive Yang Qi for speaking bluntly. These people are all very young and talented, but their strength is too weak." Yang Qi bowed slightly and said bluntly, "The strongest among Nye Tian and the others was only a late paramount god. In the eyes of a peak paramount god like Yang Qi, they were definitely weak." That said, Yang Qi was being very polite, and was simply stating his opinion. Although Blaze Jiufeng, Nangong Lin, and the others weren't very happy to hear what Yang Qi had to say, they didn't say anything. Nye Tian didn't seem to care about what Yang Qi thought of him. "Yang Qi, with your strength, how confident are you that you can kill a Darkwing Guardian King Kong?" The spirit controller seemed to know that Yang Qi would say this, so he asked with a faint smile. Yang Qi's jaw dropped. He hadn't expected the spiritualist to ask such a question. After a moment of thought, he said, "Exalted City Magistrate, your Darkwing Vajra is very strong. Ordinary peak paramount gods wouldn't stand a chance against it. However, this subordinate is 90% confident that we can kill a Darkwing Vajra. Nie Tian looked at Yang Qi and thought to himself, this guy looks rough, but he has a sense of propriety in his words. He's not reckless at all. 90%. The spiritualist pondered for a moment before he smiled faintly and continued to ask, what if you were to face 3 dark-winged Vajras at the same time? 3. Yang Qi was taken aback for a moment, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He pondered for a moment before he said, I'm not confident that I can kill all 3 of them at the same time. However, I'm confident that I can protect myself against 3 Darkwing Vajras. Very good. The spiritualist smiled faintly. He then looked at Nie Tian and the others and said, Yang Qi, do you know? Just now, several of this city lord's Darkwing guardian deities were killed. More than a dozen of them were seriously injured. I reckon that they're not far from death. What? Yang Qi's eyes trembled violently when he heard the spiritualist's words. He said in shock, the Darkwing Vajra is the guardian beast of the 7th major city, who could have killed several Darkwing Vajras and seriously injured more than a dozen of them. The spiritualist smiled bitterly. He glanced at Nie Tian and the others and said, it's these people in front of you. Yang Qi was taken aback. His face froze for a few seconds before he said, impossible. Exalted city magistrate, you must be joking. With their strength, it's impossible for them to fight against the Darkwing Vajra. Even if the 6 of them join forces, it would be impossible for them to kill 1 Darkwing Vajra, let alone several of them. Yang Qi shook his head, clearly not believing the spiritualist's words. He had fought the Darkwing Vajra before, so he naturally knew the beast's strength. In his opinion, any martial artist below the peak of the supreme god realm would be instantly killed by the Darkwing Vajra. Yang Qi, do you think I'm joking? The spiritualist laughed and said, these people faced dozens of Darkwing Vajras at the same time. Not only were they not injured, but they also killed a few of them and seriously injured more than a dozen Darkwing Vajras. Otherwise, as invaders, would they have been able to survive until now? Yang Qi was stunned for a moment. He looked at Nie Tian and the others in a daze and said, is what the exalted city magistrate said true? Although the spiritualist had said it himself, Yang Qi still did not believe it. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we give it a try. At this moment, Nangong Lin was getting impatient. He raised his eyebrows and looked coldly at Yang Qi. Yang Qi frowned. Sensing the contempt in Nangong Lin's eyes, his face darkened and he said, boy, are you provoking me? So what? Nangong Lin sneered and said, you're just a frog at the bottom of a well. Do you really think you're something? You. Yang Qi growled. His chest heaved violently, and he was suddenly speechless. He had only expressed doubts about the strength of Nie Tian and the others, but he did not expect to be looked down upon by Nangong Lin. How could he not be angry? Enough! The spiritualist's face darkened and he shouted. He looked at Nangong Lin coldly and said, you're Nangong Lin, right? Remember your identity. You're now a prisoner of the 7th main city. Nangong Lin's face stiffened. He wanted to say something, but he held back. Hearing the spiritualist's words, Nie Tian and the others couldn't help but change their expressions. They had obviously followed the spiritualist to the 7th main city. When did they become prisoners? The spiritualist was smart. He knew that Yang Qi was no match for Nangong Lin, so he stopped him in time. Yang Qi, the Dark Sea hunt will begin in 10 days. I is going to let them join. What do you think? The spiritualist glanced at Nie Tian and the others and said faintly, this. Yang Qi looked embarrassed. He still didn't believe the strength of Nie Tian and the others. Believe in my judgment. Their strength will definitely not let you down. The spiritualist smiled faintly and said confidently, well, since you insist, I will naturally not object. Yang Qi bowed slightly. Although he agreed, He was very reluctant. Then, his eyes flickered and he said, "My lord, I can let them participate in the Dark Sea hunt, but they must listen to my command." Of course. The spiritualist laughed, then looked at Nye Tian and the others and said, "Everyone, you will represent the 7th main city to participate in the Dark Sea hunt. But please remember your identity. You must listen to the command of Commander Yang Qi." Nye Tian's gaze changed slightly. He was obviously very unhappy. The spiritualist seemed to be a bit overbearing. He didn't discuss with them at all. He directly asked them to participate in the hunt, and they had to listen to the command of a stranger. Nye Tian felt very unhappy at this moment. Chapter 2366. The spiritualist's attitude made Nye Tian a little angry. Although he did not know what the Dark Sea hunt was, he could guess that it must be a very dangerous battle. The spiritualist did not kill them because he wanted them to help the 7th city and gain benefits from the Dark Sea hunt. Therefore, the current relationship between Nye Tian and the 7th city was actually a cooperative one. However, the spiritualist was tough and treated Nye Tian and the others as soft persimmons that he could manipulate. Unfortunately, Nye Tian was never a soft persimmon and would not listen to anyone's manipulation. Nye Tian frowned and took a step forward. He was about to say something. However, at this moment, a voice came from outside the hall. "Master City, the people from the 4th city have arrived." The people from the 4th city. Yang Qi heard the voice outside the hall and frowned. He said with a surprised expression, "There are still 10 days left until the Dark Sea hunt. Why are the people from the 4th city here now?" The spiritualist frowned and had a strange expression. He seemed to have a hint of bitterness as he said, "The people from the 4th city have arrived at this time. Their purpose is not simple. Master City, let me go and have a look first. I want to find out what they want." Yang Qi bowed slightly and said loudly, "No need. Since the people from the 4th city have arrived, of course I have to welcome them personally." The spiritualist laughed and then looked at Nye Tian and the others strangely. He said, "My friend Nye Tian, let's go and have a look together." The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched slightly. He just nodded and did not say much. This spiritualist was too cunning. His attitude changed so quickly. Just now, he treated Nye Tian and the others as prisoners, but now he called them friends. The spiritualist led everyone out of the hall and came to the arena of the city lord's mansion. It was very strange that the people from the 4th city visited the 7th city but did not go to the hall. Instead, they came directly to the arena. "City Lord Qi, long time no see." As soon as the spiritualist and the others arrived, a gray-clothed figure appeared and greeted them with a fake smile. The gray-robed old man was extremely skinny. As he stood there, he looked like a skeleton. His pair of beady eyes were glowing with malicious intent. However, this person's aura was very strong, even stronger than that of a spiritualist. "4th City Lord, welcome to the 7th main city. Apologies for not being able to welcome you earlier." The spiritualist also smiled and cupped his hands. The gray-robed old man was none other than the governor of the 4th main city, Yuan Ying. Yuan Ying smiled sinisterly and said, "I took the liberty to visit without notifying City Lord Qi in advance. It is I who is impolite." As he spoke, Yuan Ying's gaze swept across Nye Tian and the others with undisguised disdain. At that point, Nye Tian noticed that there were 10 young warriors standing behind Yuan Ying, all of whom pulsed with powerful auras. Shockingly, they were all peak paramount gods. He could never have guessed that a puny city like the 4th city would have so many peak paramount gods. He had no idea how many major cities the Dark Sea Pit had, but judging from the strength of the 4th city, it seemed that the Dark Sea Pit was as strong as the 9 realms. Perhaps it was because of the special spatial structure of the Dark Sea Pit that the warriors here were very strong. "4th City Lord, the Dark Sea Hunt will start in 10 days. Why are you here so early?" The spirit controller smiled and glanced at the 10 people behind Yuan Ying. He could not hide the surprise on his face. The strength of the fourth city was beyond the spiritualists' expectations. These 10 warriors were all peak paramount gods, and they were obviously going to participate in the Dark Sea hunt. Among the 10, there was one who looked very gloomy. He looked very similar to Yuan Ying, and his aura was very powerful and violent. Don't tell me this is Yuan Ying's fourth son, Yuan Lai. The spiritualist looked at the warrior in shock. He had heard that Yuan Ying's fourth son, Yuan Lai, was a top genius who had stepped into the paramount god stage before he was 10,000 years old. By the time he was 20,000 years old, he was already a peak paramount god. Yuan Lai was known as a genius of the Yuan family that only appeared once in a million years, and he was very famous in the Dark Sea pit. The spiritualist could sense that the warrior's aura wasn't much weaker than his own. QL 11-inch Yuan Lai, come and greet the 7th City Lord. At that moment, Yuan Ying smiled faintly as the corners of his mouth twitched. As expected, a warrior walked out and bowed to the spiritualist. Junior Yuan Lai pays his respects to City Lord Qi. Although it was a respectful greeting, Yuan Lai's tone wasn't respectful at all. Instead, it was full of provocation. So, this is nephew Yuan Lai. The spiritualist's eyes flickered, and he hid his surprise well. He laughed and said, I've long heard that nephew Yuan Lai is the top genius of the Yuan family in a million years. Now that I've met you, it seems you live up to your reputation. City Lord Qi, you flatter me. Yuan Lai responded, but his tone was very cold. City Lord Qi, Lai is young, but he's strong enough. Yuan Ying smiled and said, I'm going to let him participate in the Dark Sea hunt. He's quite ambitious, and he wants to be the captain of the hunting team. As his father, I can't disappoint him, so I let him be the captain of the hunting team of the 4th main city. Yuan Ying smiled sinisterly and said, City Lord Qi, your 7th main city's 10 hunters should have been chosen by now, right? Which one is the captain? Hearing Yuan Ying's words, the spirit manipulator glanced at Yang Qi with a gloomy expression. Yang Qi is the captain of the 7th main city's hunting team. Yang Qi naturally understood the meaning of the spiritualist. He stepped forward and said in a humble manner, Oh, it's Commander Yang Qi. Yuan Ying laughed and was not surprised at all. He said, Commander Yang Qi is indeed one of the best among the younger generation of the 7th main city. No matter how I think about it, the 7th main city doesn't have any suitable candidates. Only Commander Yang Qi can take charge. Yin Yang's perverse tone was filled with a strong sense of mockery. Yuan Ying was obviously mocking him. The 7th main city had so few talents that they could only let Yang Qi be the captain of the hunting team. The spiritualist's old face was embarrassed. He forced a smile, but it was like a blooming chrysanthemum that was about to wither. Commander Yang Qi, I heard that you're the number 1 among the younger generation of the 7th main city. At this moment Yuan Lai laughed weirdly and said, Both of us are the captain of the hunting team. I'd like to ask Commander Yang Qi for some advice. I wonder if you'd do me the honor. Yang Qi's face froze when he heard Yuan Lai's words. Yuan Lai was asking for advice on the surface, but every word he said was a provocation. Moreover, Yuan Lai's eyes were full of undisguised contempt. He did not take Yang Qi seriously at all. Nie Tian looked at Yuan Lai and his eyes narrowed. He thought to himself, this father and son are not here to visit. They're obviously here to provoke us. Chapter 2367. Yang Qi's face went stiff, and he didn't know what to say. Yuan Lai was about the same age as him, and he was also a peak paramount god. But Yuan Lai was known as a freakishly talented genius, and had reached the peak paramount god level much earlier than Yang Qi had. Judging from Yuan Lai's aura, it was obvious that Yuan Lai was much stronger than Yang Qi. Why aren't you saying anything, Commandant Yang Qi? Yuan Lai said with a cold, arrogant smile. Young Sir Yuan Lai, the 4th and 7th major cities have always been close. Yang Qi smiled awkwardly. In the coming undersea hunt, our two cities will be allies, so there's no need for us to fight. That's right. The spiritualist chuckled dryly and looked at Yuan Ying. Fourth City Magistrate, we're allies, so there's no need for us to fight. Ahem. Yuan Ying let out a dry cough and said, the fourth and seventh major cities are indeed allies, but I feel that there should be a hierarchy among allies. Why don't we have Yuan Lai and Yang Qi have a little competition? That way we can decide who's the leader and who's the subordinate. What do you say? His voice was calm, but filled with provocation. QL11 Yuan Ying had come to the seventh major city ahead of schedule, and his wild ambitions were as clear as day. In the past dark sea hunts, the fourth and seventh main cities had always been allies. The hunters of the two cities would help each other during the hunts. But this time, Yuan Ying didn't seem interested in maintaining that relationship. Instead, he wanted to take the lead and make the seventh major city a vassal of the fourth. In recent years, the seventh major city had been declining in strength. Over the past tens of thousands of years, the seventh major city hadn't produced any geniuses, and had been the subject of ridicule from the other major cities. If things continued like this, the seventh major city would lose its position as a major city, and become a vassal of the other major cities. The spiritualist would never have thought that the first person to make things difficult for him would be the fourth main city, which he had been allied with for hundreds of thousands of years. Fourth City Lord, this isn't very good, is it? The spiritualist frowned and looked very embarrassed. He knew what Yuan Ying was trying to do, but the seventh major city was indeed weaker than the fourth major city, so he could only endure it. There's nothing bad about it. It's time to determine the primary and secondary status between our two cities. Yuan Ying smiled faintly, and his attitude instantly became tough. The spiritualist's face stiffened. He knew that he would not be able to escape this fight. Seventh City Lord, forgive me for speaking bluntly. At this moment, Yuan Lai said loudly, your seventh main city has long since declined. Now, it's just a main city in name. In fact, many of the vassal cities are stronger than the seventh main city. Your seventh main city is just like your divine guardian beast. It's already good to look at but useless. The spiritualist's eyes trembled when he heard Yuan Lai suddenly mention the divine guardian beast. He seemed to have discovered something, and he asked in shock, Yuan Lai, what did you do to the divine guardian beast? Nie Tian's eyes also froze. He knew that the divine guardian beast of the seventh main city was the dozens of dark-wing guardian beasts. The spiritualist seemed to have noticed that something had happened to the dark-wing guardian beast. Yuan Lai smiled cold and said, of course there's no need for those things to exist. I've already helped the seventh city lord get rid of all those useless monkeys. Yuan Lai, you puff. The spiritualist's eyes suddenly narrowed. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly felt a tightness in his chest. He couldn't bear the blow and spat out a mouthful of blood. The faces of Nie Tian and the others immediately changed. The useless monkeys that Yuan Lai was referring to were obviously the Dark-Wing Guardian Beast. It was obvious that Yuan Lai had killed all the Dark-Wing Guardian Beasts. The spiritualist regarded the Dark-Wing Guardian Beast as his treasure, but now that all his treasures had been killed, how could he not be upset? The spiritualist did not know how much energy and time the Dark-Wing Guardian Beasts had consumed. He regarded the Dark-Wing Guardian Beast as an important trump card of the seventh main city. Lord Seventh City Lord, don't be too angry. Yuan Lai smiled faintly when he saw that the spiritualist was so angry that he spat out blood. Then, he waved his hand, and dozens of black and bloody corpses appeared and landed on an open space in the distance. The pungent smell of blood permeated the entire arena. Those black and bloody corpses were the Dark-Wing Guardian Beast. Not only did Yuan Lai kill the Dark-Wing Guardian Beast, but he also brought its corpses here. Lord Seventh City Lord, I know that you cherish these monkeys very much, so I specially brought their corpses here as a gift to you. Yuan Lai chuckled and said, I hope that Lord 7th City Lord will feel better when you see these corpses. These comforting words were like steel needles that pierced the spiritualist's heart. The spiritualist looked at the dark-winged guardian beast's corpse on the ground angrily and spat out another mouthful of blood. His years of hard work had gone down the drain, and it was even given to him as a gift. The feeling of being humiliated almost drove him crazy. If he did not have a shred of rationality left in him, he would have pounced on Yuan Lai and killed him. However, he did not dare to do so. This was because Yuan Ying was also here. Yuan Ying's strength was above his. If the spiritualist made a move now, he would be courting death. Yuan Ying and his son had obviously planned this visit for a long time. This time, the 7th main city was really going to become the 4th main city's vassal. Pfft! The spiritualist's heart ached even more at the thought of this, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. After spitting out 3 mouthfuls of blood, the spiritualist's old face turned a little pale, and he looked very embarrassed. At that moment, a figure appeared behind the spiritualist and asked faintly, Lord Castellan, are you all right? Nye Tian. The spiritualist turned to look at the person behind him, and called out in a deep voice with a helpless look on his face. Nye Tian supported the spiritualist and fixed his eyes on Yuan Lai. The father and son of the Yuan family had really gone too far. Not only had they killed the 7th main city's divine guardian beast, but they had also brought its corpse over to humiliate the spiritualist. How could Nye Tian not see that the father and son of the Yuan family had done this to intimidate the 7th main city so that the spiritualist would obediently become a vassal city lord? At that moment Yuan Lai's voice sounded again, and he looked at Yang Qi with a cold gaze. Commander Yang Qi, can we start the competition now? His eyes were filled with killing intent, and he didn't want to compete at all. He wanted to kill Yang Qi. From the beginning to the end, Yuan Lai didn't even look at Nye Tian and the others. A group of late-stage paramount gods simply couldn't enter his eyes. Yang Qi's face froze. He was so frightened by Yuan Lai's killing intent that he couldn't say a word. But at that moment, the spiritualist's deep voice sounded, Yang Qi. Yang Qi's eyes trembled. How could he not understand that the spiritualist wanted him to fight Yuan Lai? If Yang Qi won, he might be able to change the 7th main city's fate. This was the 7th main city's last chance. Chapter 2368. Yang Qi roared angrily. The fear in his eyes disappeared and was replaced by a strong desire to fight. He had grown up in the 7th main city. Now that his city was being humiliated by an outsider, how could he not fight back? A real man does not care about death. If he could die for his city, he, Yang Qi, would have no regrets. Commander Yang Qi, please. Yuan Lai laughed coldly. His silhouette flickered as he leapt onto the stage. City Lord, Yang Qi is going. Yang Qi turned to look at the spiritualist and said in a deep voice, Yang Qi, be careful. The spiritualist's eyes trembled violently and he looked extremely pained. He knew that Yang Qi was no match for Yuan Lai, but he still had to let Yang Qi fight. This was the 7th main city's last chance. As the city lord, how could he watch the 7th main city become a vassal city? Nye Tian looked at Yang Qi's retreating figure. He didn't say anything, nor did he try to stop him. At this moment, Yuan Lai and Yang Qi's figures stood on the wide arena. Everyone's eyes were focused on the two of them. Humph! Yuan Ying looked at them coldly and the corner of his mouth twitched. He thought to himself, Yang Qi, you don't know what's good for you. You won't even be able to withstand one move from Lai. The spiritualist's eyes lit up as he looked forward to a miracle. Commander Yang Qi, I will only need one move to kill you. On the stage, Yuan Lai raised his finger and said coldly. The murderous intent in his eyes was on the verge of bursting out. Arrogant! Yang Qi roared and his aura rose like a raging wave. He knew that Yuan Lai was strong, but he did not believe that Yuan Lai could kill him with one move. Die! In the next moment, Yang Qi roared, and his aura skyrocketed to the extreme. He directly struck out with his palm, and the rolling palm force was like a surging wave, condensing into a terrifying palm shadow that blasted toward Yuan Lai. Yang Qi wanted to take the initiative. This was his only chance to beat Yuan Lai. You are seeking death. Yuan Lai felt the violent qi in front of him, but he was not afraid at all. His lips curled into a cold smile. Boom! He raised his palm slightly and slapped out with it, causing a line of fire to suddenly shoot out and instantly blossom into a sea of flames. A blazing aura filled the entire arena, and it seemed as if even the air had been ignited. In an instant, the spiritualist sensed that something was amiss. His expression changed, and he cried out in alarm, "Not good!" Bang! In the next moment, the palm image on the arena instantly shattered, and a muffled sound rang out as a figure was flung into the air, leaving a trail of blood behind it. It was Yang Qi. The number one person in the 7th main city? Yuan Lai stood on the arena, smiled cold, and said arrogantly, "Trash that can't even withstand a single blow." Yang Qi hovered in midair, his entire body wrapped in blazing flames. He looked like a fireball that could explode at any moment. Yuan Lai's power of fire was too terrifying. It could actually invade Yang Qi's body and burn his Yuan meridians. If his Yuan meridians were to be burned, Yang Qi would definitely die. Just as Yang Qi's figure was about to land, he suddenly felt a soft force appear in the air and catch him. He suddenly turned around and saw a figure appear. It was Nie Tian. "Commander Yang, are you all right?" Nie Tian asked faintly as he landed steadily with Yang Qi. The power of fire around Yang Qi's body was still burning, and his entire body was dripping with blood. The power of fire in his body was trying to burn him into ashes. Huh! Seeing that someone had saved Yang Qi, Yuan Lai frowned. Then, he smiled cold and said, "My violent heavenly flames has invaded his body, and the meridians in his limbs will be burned into ashes in a moment. No one can save him." Yang Qi. When the spiritualist heard Yuan Lai's words, he cried out in grief. Yang Qi was the last hope of the 7th main city, and he was about to die. How could the spiritualist not be sad? He was very regretful. Why did he have to let Yang Qi fight Yuan Lai? QL11 He really did not expect Yuan Lai's strength to be so strong. Yang Qi could not even take one move from Yuan Lai. At this moment, the people of the 7th main city who were watching the battle were all stunned, and their faces were full of shock. Yang Qi was very famous in the 7th main city, and was even considered to be second only to the spiritualist. But now, he was defeated by Yuan Lai in one move. One could imagine how shocked the crowd was. Yuan Lai was indeed a powerful existence. This time, the 7th main city could not escape the fate of becoming a vassal city. On the other side, the people of the 4th main city were very happy. This kind of trash is actually the number one person among the younger generation of the 7th main city. It seems that the 7th main city has declined to the point that there is only an empty shell left. What bullsh** T commander? His strength is too weak. He can't even take one move from young Master Lai. What a waste. After today, there will no longer be a 7th main city in the dark ocean black prison. Our 4th main city will have another vassal city. The people of the 4th main city were very excited, and their arrogance was incomparably arrogant. Nie Tian did not care about the others. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his divine sense sensed Yang Qi's body. I did not expect that this guy called Yuan Lai to have merged with the 12th demonic fire, the violent heavenly flames. No wonder he is so strong. Nie Tian thought to himself, but the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. Yuan Lai's violent heavenly flames was the 12th demonic fire on the demonic fire list, and its burning power was extremely strong. If the violent heavenly flames invaded the body of an ordinary martial artist, their limbs and veins would be burned in the blink of an eye. Yang Qi's current situation was very bad. His martial body was already on the verge of death. However, he was very lucky to have met Nie Tian. Nie Tian was someone who had merged with the first and second demonic fires. Why would he be afraid of the violent heavenly flames? Commander Yang, it will be a little painful. You have to bear with it. Nie Tian smiled faintly, and a flame gushed out of his palm and directly entered Yang Qi's body. Ah! In the blink of an eye, Yang Qi felt a violent force appear, rushing into his body like a wild beast. The sudden pain caused him to howl miserably. However, he immediately felt that the burning power in his body had weakened a lot. That flame had actually swallowed the violent heavenly flames in his body. Nie Tian had used the second demonic fire, the heart of nothingness, which was known to swallow everything. Of course, the small violent heavenly flames could swallow it instantly. The flames around Yang Qi's body dissipated, but his aura was still very weak. Nie Tian immediately released the power of the Terra Vein source. Yang Qi's aura quickly stabilized, and the bloodstains on his body gradually disappeared. However, his face was still a little pale. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian had pulled Yang Qi back from the brink of death. Thank you, Lord Nie Tian. Yang Qi was stunned for a long time, and finally reacted. It was as if he was in a dream, and his voice was trembling. The spiritualist was also stunned, and he was speechless for a long time. He had not expected that Nie Tian would have such a heaven-defying method to actually save Yang Qi. You're welcome. Nie Tian smiled faintly, and then took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Yuan Lai. This is impossible. Yuan Lai was stunned by the scene in front of him. He stood on the battle stage in a daze, and finally let out a scream. His voice was extremely sharp. He did not dare to imagine that Nie Tian had actually saved Yang Qi. On the other side, Yuaning stared at Nie Tian, his eyes flashing with a cold light, like the greed and sharpness of a poisonous wolf. Chapter 2369. Yuaning stared at Nie Tian, his eagle-like eyes filled with unconcealable greed and passion. He could clearly see that the flame Nie Tian had used to save Yang Qi was the legendary Heart of Nihility, which was ranked second on the demonic fire list. The Yuan family was a fire-based martial arts family, and their favorite thing was the demonic fire. Yuan Lai had merged with the violent heavenly flames when he was young. Otherwise, his strength wouldn't have been so terrifying. Although Nie Tian was staring at Yuan Lai, he was very calm and had no intention of making a move. Kid, who are you? Yuaning finally couldn't help but ask in a deep voice. Nie Tian smiled faintly and turned his gaze to Yuaning. I'm a newly recruited city guard of the 7th main city. Yuan Ying's gaze turned cold as he said coldly, a mere guard has merged with the legendary Heart of Nihility. Then Yuaning glanced at the spiritualist and said provocatively, Castellan 7, this guard of yours isn't simple. The spirit controller's eyes flickered as he looked at Nie Tian, a hint of pleasant surprise flashing across his eyes. City Lord, do you want my help? Nie Tian perfectly captured the spiritualist's reaction. His lips curled up slightly as he transmitted his voice to the latter. Nie Tian, are you confident that you can defeat Yuan Lai? The spiritualist's eyes lit up and he couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. He had just seen Nie Tian save Yang Qi, so he immediately thought that perhaps Nie Tian could defeat Yuan Lai. He wasn't too familiar with the demonic fire, but since Yuaning said that Nie Tian had a second demonic fire in his body, it was most likely true. Compared to Yuan Lai, Nie Tian's strength was much weaker. However, with the help of the second devil flame, he might stand a chance. Lord Castellan, it doesn't seem appropriate to send a prisoner to fight against the strongest member of the clan of the 4th major city. Nie Tian's lips curled into a cold smile as he sent a voice transmission to the Castellan. The spiritualist's face stiffened when he heard Nie Tian's words. He quickly said, Nie Tian, my young friend, I misspoke just now. As long as you can defeat Yuan Lai, You'll be the most distinguished guest of my seventh main city. Just now, in the lobby, the spiritualist directly said that Nye Tian and the others were prisoners. At that time, his idea was to suppress the arrogance of Nye Tian and the others, so that they would have a clear understanding of their status. Who would have thought that his words would infuriate Nye Tian? What was even more unexpected was that he had just belittled Nye Tian, and now he was begging the latter. If he had known that this moment would come, the spiritualist would never have said what he had said before. At that moment, he couldn't wait to slap himself a few times. Governor, there's no need to be the most distinguished guest. Nye Tian smiled faintly, knowing that the time was right. He said, I can defeat Yuan Lai, and I can also represent the seventh main city in the Dark Sea hunt. However, I also have a few things that I need your help with. I wonder if you're willing to help me? Yes, I'm willing. The spiritualist nodded heavily, his eyes flashing with a fiery light. He said, Nye Tian, my young friend, rest assured. As long as you're willing to help, I, the spiritualist, swear in the name of the seventh main city, that I will do my best to help you. Humph! Nye Tian laughed in his heart. This was exactly what he wanted from the spiritualist. Immediately, his gaze changed slightly, and he transmitted his voice. Governor, you already knew that we came to the Dark Sea prison to save someone. What I need your help with is related to saving someone. Saving someone? The spiritualist was stunned for a moment, and his face couldn't help but turn ugly. The Dark Sea prison was a death cage that one could only enter but not leave. Saving someone was the most difficult thing to help. Moreover, the spiritualist knew that anyone who was imprisoned in the Dark Sea prison was a very difficult person to deal with, and there were layers of guard. However, he didn't know what rank the prisoner Nye Tian wanted to save was. If it was an ordinary prisoner, it would be fine, but if it was a heaven-rank prisoner, it would be troublesome. Governor, are you not willing to help? Nye Tian looked at the spiritualist and asked with a faint smile. I am willing. The spiritualist's gaze swept over Yuan Ying and Yuan Lai, and finally nodded in agreement. No matter who Nye Tian wanted to save, he would agree to it first. For the spiritualist, the current situation was the most troublesome. He couldn't just watch as the seventh main city became someone else's vassal in his hands. It's a deal. Nye Tian smiled faintly, and then his gaze locked on Yuan Ying's body. He said loudly, Fourth Governor, you have a good eye. The devil fire I used just now was the second devil fire, the heart of nothingness. It really is the heart of nothingness. Yuan Ying's eyes suddenly trembled, and there was a blazing light in his eyes. Although he guessed that Nye Tian used the heart of nothingness, Nye Tian's own admission still surprised him. Boy, you are very arrogant. Yuan Ying smiled cold and his eyes were filled with greed. Fourth Governor, if I am not mistaken, you are also a martial artist with a fire attribute. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, How about we make a bet? Bet? Yuan Ying frowned and sneered. Boy, how do you want to bet? Nye Tian's mouth twitched and he said, Fourth Governor, you must really want to get the heart of nothingness. Then I will bet the heart of nothingness that I will fight with young Master Yuan Lai. If I win, Fourth Governor will immediately leave the seventh main city. If I lose, the heart of nothingness will be offered with both hands, and the seventh main city will become a vassal city of the fourth main city. What do you think of this bet, Fourth Governor? The faint voice was incomparably calm, but it revealed a domineering confidence. Yuan Ying looked at Nye Tian and felt the confidence in the latter's eyes. He couldn't help but stare, and he said in his heart, What the hell is this kid doing? With his strength, he will definitely be killed in seconds against Yuan Lai. He is so confident now, does he still have a trump card? Yuan Ying couldn't understand why Nye Tian was so confident. The spiritualist's heart tightened when he heard this, and his expression was very ugly. This time, the fate of the seventh main city was really on the shoulders of Nye Tian alone. However, there was no other way. Nie Tian was the only hope of the seventh main city. What? Fourth governor, do you dare not bet? Nie Tian saw that Yuan did not speak, raised his eyebrows, and said in an extremely provocative manner. Yuan frowned and his eyes flickered even more. Faintly, he always felt that Nie Tian must have hidden his strength, which he could not see through. However, he very much wanted to get the heart of nothingness, so he was very hesitant. In fact, at this moment, he could also snatch it by force, but the spiritualist was after all a city governor. If he really fought to the death, the result might not be as perfect as he thought. If he could take the seventh main city without bloodshed, it would naturally be the best way. Fourth City Lord, are you afraid? Nie Tian sneered and provoked in a low voice. His provocation was like a slap to Yuan Ying's face. Chapter 2370. Yuan Lai stood on the stage and stared at Nie Tian like a venomous wolf. It was because of Nie Tian that he had failed to kill Yang Qi, which made him very unhappy. Furthermore, Nie Tian possessed the second demonic fire, which was even more unacceptable to him. In his opinion, only a genius like him was qualified to fuse with such a powerful demonic fire as the heart of nothingness. Nie Tian was just a piece of trash. What right did he have to fuse with the heart of nothingness? To put it bluntly, he felt that Nie Tian was not worthy of fusing with the heart of nothingness. Nie Tian ignored Yuan Lai and stared at Yuan Ying. He smiled faintly and said, Fourth City Lord, Yuan Lai can't wait any longer. What's your answer? Father, agree to this kid. Yuan Lai shouted when he saw Yuan Ying hesitating. This kid's strength is much weaker than Yang Qi's. If I can't kill him in one move, my surname isn't Yuan. Yuan Ying frowned when he heard Yuan Lai's words. The worry in his heart grew. The biggest taboo in a duel between powerhouses was to underestimate the opponent. Yuan Lai was completely enraged by Nie Tian. This was not a good choice. However, in the next moment, Yuan Ying hardened his heart and shouted, Fine, I promise you. In the end, he agreed to Nie Tian's condition. He could not see through Nie Tian's true strength, but he had full confidence in Yuan Lai. It was no exaggeration to say that in the entire Dark Ocean prison, there were less than 5 martialists under 100,000 years old who could defeat Yuan Lai. Yuan Ying did not believe that a mere Nie Tian was Yuan Lai's match. Very well. Nie Tian smiled faintly when he heard Yuan Ying agree. He took a step forward and soared into the sky before landing firmly on the stage. Everyone's eyes trembled as they stared at Nie Tian and Yuan Lai. Lai Yin Jiufeng and the others were a little nervous. They weren't sure what the outcome of this battle would be. The spiritualist and the others from the seventh main city felt their hearts in their throat. This was because the outcome of Nie Tian's battle would determine the fate of the seventh main city. Brat, you'll soon know how big the gap between us is. On the martial arena, Yuan Lai stared at Nie Tian with a gloomy gaze and said coldly, I only need one move to kill you. Really? Nie Tian's response was very calm. His lips curled into a faint smile as he said, In my opinion, after this battle, young Master Yuan will no longer have the surname Yuan. Yuan Lai had just said that if he couldn't kill Nie Tian in one move, he wouldn't be surnamed Yuan. But Nie Tian said that after this battle, Yuan Lai would no longer have the surname Yuan. Both of them were very confident. But between the two of them, one was bound to be arrogant. You're courting death. Yuan Lai's eyes darkened when he was provoked. He let out a wild roar, and his aura surged to the limit as he thrust his palm forward. Boom! An endless amount of flame energy gushed out like a surging tsunami, rolling over. Yuan Lai had merged with the 12th demon fire, violent heavenly flames. The burning aura of the violent heavenly flames filled the entire martial arena. It was as if the surroundings had turned into a giant furnace. How terrifying! The crowd exclaimed when they saw the scene on the martial arena from afar. The power of Yuan Lai's palm strike was even more terrifying than the one he had used on Yang Qi. It seemed that at this moment, He had already gone all out and was determined to kill Nye Tian. The 12th demon fire? In the face of Yuan Lai's all-out palm strike, Nye Tian only smiled faintly. The corners of his mouth curled up into a calm arc as he muttered, "What a pity! I'll defeat you with one move." The next moment, Nye Tian's face turned serious. His aura surged, and he slashed out with starlight heavenly slash. Suddenly, a terrifying sword shadow appeared. Starry sky, ancient martial technique, starfire burning sea. Boom. The moment the sword shadow appeared, it was like a fire dragon, rolling and roaring. Boom. The next moment, two terrifying power of fire collided. Suddenly, flames rushed up, and the entire martial arena became a sea of fire. Nye Tian and Yuan Lai's figures could no longer be seen. Only violent flames could be seen, rolling and roaring like wildfire snake. The space within tens of thousands of meters of the martial arena became incomparably hot, showing a dense state, as if the space was about to burn. This. The crowd's eyes trembled, and they all took a deep breath, and their expressions were extremely shocked. Never could anyone have imagined that the battle between Nye Tian and Yuan Lai would be so fierce. Their first move was a clash of peak power, and they were going all out. After a long time, the flames on the martial arena faded away, and two figures appeared in front of the crowd. Everyone's eyes trembled as they stared at the two figures. One of them was a silvery figure, standing in the middle of the martial arena, as steady as Mount Tai. His expression was calm, and he had a faint smile on his face. It was none other than Nye Tian. On the other side, Yuan Lai was covered in blood, and trembling, as if he might collapse at any moment. This. Everyone's pupils constricted, and they were so shocked that they couldn't speak. This wasn't an illusion. It was real. Nye Tian had won and Yuan Lai had lost. Yuan Lai, who was a peak paramount god, had actually lost to Nye Tian, who was a mid-paramount god, and he had been defeated so thoroughly and brutally. With a single sword move, Nye Tian had seriously injured Yuan Lai, and rendered him powerless to fight back. The scene instantly fell into a dead silence. Lai. After a long moment passed, Yuan Ying's howl rang out. Yuan Ying's figure flashed onto the arena and supported Yuan Lai. His face couldn't help but sink when he sensed that the latter was already on the verge of death, and he stared coldly at Nye Tian with a murderous gaze. "Father, save me," Yuan Lai said, his aura very weak. After struggling to speak, he passed out. "Fourth City Magistrate, you can choose to kill me," Nye Tian said coolly, not the slightest bit fearful of Yuan Ying. "But Yuan Lai doesn't have much time left," Yuan Ying said. "If you go back now, you might be able to save his life. If you don't, even if you heal him, he'll still be a cripple. Just wait and see, boy." Yuan Ying growled, then blurred into motion, taking Yuan Lai with him as he left. Nye Tian looked in the direction the father and son had left, a faint smile on his face. Then he blurred into motion, returning to the spiritualist and the others. At this moment, the remaining people from the fourth main city did not seem to have reacted as they stood there in a daze. "Your city magistrate is gone," Nye Tian said, his voice cold and cold. "What are you waiting for? Get the hell out of here." The people from the fourth major city snapped out of their daze and fled, not forgetting to look back at Nye Tian with terror in their eyes. Nye Tian smiled coolly and said to the spiritualist, "Exalted city magistrate, the battle is over. Let's go back to the main hall." "He really did win," the spiritualist said. Like a puppet, the spirit controller froze on the spot for more than 10 seconds before he finally came to his senses and spoke in a daze. Chapter 2371. In the Great Hall of the 7th Main City's City Lord Manor. "Ha ha ha, I didn't think that Lord Nye Tian would be so powerful. He heavily injured Yuan Lai with just one strike." Yang Qi's laughter resounded in the Great Hall. He was very happy. "My young friend Nye Tian, your strength is astounding." The spiritualist stared at Nye Tian with shining eyes. He still couldn't quite believe it. The seventh main city had been forced into a corner by the Yuan father and son duo. He hadn't thought that Nie Tian would be able to turn the tide and chase away the Yuan father and son duo alone. Nie Tian smiled faintly, his expression calm. The reason he was able to defeat Yuan Lai in one strike was because his combat strength was astounding, and the other was because of the element suppression. He had used the chaotic flames in his attack just now. The chaotic flames were a combination of the first demonic fire, the universe boundary, and the second demonic fire, the heart of nothingness. It crushed all other demonic fires. If Yuan Lai's violent heavenly flames were used against others, it would be his greatest advantage. But now that he had encountered Nie Tian, it became his greatest disadvantage. In fact, Nie Tian's attack on the arena could have killed Yuan Lai directly. The reason he hadn't done so was because he didn't want to anger Yuan Ying. Yuan Ying leaving with the heavily injured Yuan Lai was the best outcome for the seventh main city. At that moment, Nie Tian smiled faintly and said to the spirit controller, "City Lord, I've fulfilled my promise. Now it's time for you to fulfill it." The spiritualist's eyes narrowed, and his expression turned ugly. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled. He knew that Nie Tian wouldn't help him for free, given his personality. As it turned out, Nie Tian and the spiritualist had made a secret deal. "City Lord, you won't go back on your word, right?" Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he saw the spiritualist's ugly expression. "My young friend Nie Tian, tell me, who do you want to save?" The spiritualist frowned and asked in a deep voice. He was a spiritualist and not a good person, but he would not go back on his word. Moreover, he felt that it was definitely not a wise choice to go back on his word with a person like Nie Tian. 7 murders, Nie Tian said, staring at the spiritualist. 7 kills. As soon as he finished speaking, the spiritualist and Yang Qi screamed and stood up at the same time. Both of their faces were filled with fear. Their eyes were trembling as if they had seen something extremely horrifying. Nie Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng's expressions darkened when they saw the spiritualist and Yang Qi's reactions. The two of them clearly knew who 7 Kills was, and they were extremely afraid of him. "You know of 7 Kills?" Lai Yin Jiufeng couldn't help but stand up and ask. QL11 The spiritualist and Yang Qi took a long time to calm down, but they still could not hide the shock on their faces. Of course they knew of 7 Kills. It was a taboo in the Dark Sea Black Prison. "City Lord, are you all right?" Nie Tian asked with a frown. He was not in a hurry. I am fine." The spiritualist calmed down a little. Even his words were a little confused. He didn't know how to address himself. It seems that the name 7 Kills is very famous in the Dark Sea Black Prison. Nie Tian laughed, but his expression was not very good. The more famous the name 7 Kills was, the more it proved that their rescue mission was going to be very difficult. "My young friend Nie Tian, to tell you the truth, the name 7 Kills is a taboo in the Dark Sea Black Prison." The spiritualist let out a long breath and said with trembling eyes, "Why?" Nie Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng asked in surprise at the same time. The spiritualist sighed and said, "The prisoners of the Dark Sea Black Prison are divided into 3 ranks: human, earth, and heaven. Human rank prisoners are more common, but they are also cruel and bloodthirsty people. They are usually imprisoned in the human prison and guarded by human rank prison guards. Earth rank prisoners are even more vicious than human rank prisoners. They are bloodthirsty and cruel, so they are usually imprisoned in the Earth prison and guarded by Earth rank prison guards. Heaven rank prisoners are the scariest. They kill like flies and are extremely violent. They are the most dangerous. They are imprisoned in the Heaven prison and guarded by Heaven rank prison guards." At this point, the spirit controller paused and looked at Nie Tian, seemingly hesitant. 7 Kills is a Heaven rank prisoner? Nie Tian frowned and asked. "No." Unexpectedly, the spirit controller shook his head. His eyes could not help but tremble as he said, 7 Kills is a Heaven-level prisoner, Heaven realm. Nye Tian was taken aback, confusion in his eyes. Weren't the prisoners of the Dark Sea Black Prison only divided into 3 ranks? Heaven, Earth, and Human? Why was there another Heaven rank prisoner? Yes, Heaven rank. The spiritualist nodded and said, there were no Heaven rank prisoners in the Dark Sea Black Prison before. 7 Kills' arrival added a Heaven rank prisoner to the rank. 7 Kills is the only Heaven rank prisoner in the Dark Sea Black Prison. Nye Tian frowned and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. 7 Kills was too terrifying. He had raised the rank of the prisoners in the Dark Sea Black Prison by 1 rank. The spiritualist seemed to think of something and said, when 7 Kills came to the Dark Sea Black Prison, he broke free from the shackles and slaughtered the entire 3rd main city by himself. Hundreds of thousands of people in the 3rd main city were killed by him alone. This matter alarmed Lord Dark Emperor. Lord Dark Emperor personally ordered the 17 main cities' city lords to work together and finally capture 7 Kills. In the end, the Dark Emperor personally appeared and designated 7 Kills as a Heaven rank prisoner and sent him to a secret place in the Dark Sea Black Prison. After that, the name 7 Kills became a taboo in the Dark Sea Black Prison and no one was allowed to mention it. After saying that, the spiritualist's face was a little shocked. Nye Tian couldn't help but frown as he let out a deep breath. 7 Kills was indeed too terrifying. He destroyed a main city in the Dark Sea Black Prison by himself. The 17 city lords had to work together to take him down. Judging from the spiritualist and Yuan Ying's strength, the 17 city lords were close to the peak of the immortal state. 7 Kills fought against the 17 city lords alone. It was extremely ferocious. At that time, 7 Kills already had such battle strength. It was hard to imagine how strong 7 Kills was now. Nye Tian estimated that even the most conservative estimate was that 7 Kills was a peak immortal state expert. Even if he could not compare to Nye Dao and the others, he was about the same as Earth Chief or Nangong Duxiu. He did not think that the person he wanted to save was such a terrifying expert. The most troublesome thing was that 7 Kills was imprisoned in a secret place by the Dark Emperor. The Dark Emperor should be the ruler of the Dark Sea Black Prison. This person was definitely a powerful martial artist. The spiritualist did not say these things because he wanted to help. Unfortunately, his strength was limited and he probably could not help Nye Tian and the others. This rescue mission was more difficult than Nye Tian had expected. Lien Jiufeng's expression was dark, clearly feeling the difficulty. After calming down a little, Nye Tian looked at the spirit controller and asked, City Lord, do you know where 7 Kills is imprisoned? The spiritualist only said that 7 Kills was imprisoned in a secret place. He did not say where it was. Chapter 2372. The spiritualist's gaze abruptly focused when he heard Nye Tian's question. He then avoided Nye Tian. He was clearly avoiding the latter. City Lord, 7 Kills is very important to us. Nye Tian's gaze was dark as he said, I hope that City Lord can speak your mind. The spiritualist's expression froze slightly. He hesitated for a long time before taking out a map. He unfurled the map and said, This is the complete map of the Dark Sea Prison. There are 17 main cities and 83 vassal cities. Nye Tian, Lien Jiufeng, and the others walked forward and stared at the map. The Dark Sea Prison was not large. It was about 5,000 kilometers in circumference. However, the space here was folded, so the actual space was much larger. The 17 main cities and the 83 vassal cities of the Dark Sea Prison were actually islands scattered on the Dark Sea. At the center of the 17 main cities was a very large island. It was several times larger than the main cities. This largest island did not have a name. It seemed to be ownerless. City Lord, is this ownerless land where the Dark Monarch lives? Nye Tian frowned and pointed at the largest island. No. The spiritualist's gaze focused slightly. He looked at Nye Tian and said, The Dark Monarch lives in the first main city. The ownerless land you see is the number 1 forbidden ground of the Dark Sea prison. It is called the Heart of the Dark Sea. There is an underwater passage in the heart of the Dark Sea that leads to the bottom of the Dark Sea. It is a bottomless abyss. It is rumored that the greatest secret of the Dark Sea prison is hidden in the heart of the Dark Sea. After saying this, the spiritualist looked at Nyetian, his eyes flashing with obscure light. Nyetian frowned. How could he not hear the spiritualist's hidden meaning? The spiritualist was telling him that 7 kills was very likely imprisoned in the heart of the Dark Sea. How are the guards of the heart of the Dark Sea? Lian Jiufeng naturally understood the spiritualist's meaning, so he asked directly. The spiritualist forced a smile and said, "There are no guards in the heart of the Dark Sea. However, that place is the number 1 forbidden area of the Dark Sea's black prison. Countless people have entered that place, but none of them have returned alive." Lian Jiufeng's eyes focused slightly. He said solemnly, "It looks like the heart of the Dark Sea is a dangerous place. A place of great danger." The spiritualist nodded heavily. His gaze swept across Nyetian and the others as he said, "I don't know why you want to save 7 kills, but I advise you not to try the heart of the Dark Sea so easily." The corner of Nyetian's mouth rose as he smiled helplessly. The spiritualist had no idea of their current situation. No matter where 7 kills was imprisoned, they had to rescue him. "City Lord, thank you for telling us all of this." Nyetian became much colder as he thanked the spiritualist indifferently. The spiritualist nodded slightly and said, "Young friend Nyetian, you have yet to fulfill your promise to me. Do not worry, City Lord. I, Nyetian, am not a person who goes back on his word." Nyetian smiled faintly. Of course he knew that the spiritualist was referring to the Dark Sea Hunt. He said, "City Lord, please tell us what the Dark Sea Hunt is." Amen. The spiritualist nodded heavily and said, "The Dark Sea Hunt is a great hunting competition between all the islands of the Dark Sea Black Prison. The Dark Sea Hunt is held once every 50,000 years. The result of the hunt determines the ranking of the islands for the next 50,000 years. The 7th main city used to be a vassal city. Because of the last Dark Sea Hunt, it was ranked 7th, so it was promoted to the 7th main city. The Dark Sea Hunt only allows young martial practitioners below the age of 100,000 to participate. The main city has 10 quotas for hunters, and the vassal city has 5 quotas. The first main city is the city ruled by Lord Dark Emperor, and there are 50 quotas for hunters. The final result of the hunt is determined by the hunting results of the hunters of each city. After that, the spiritualist looked at Nyetian and the others and said, "This is the general situation. Is there anything you do not understand?" Nyetian's eyes narrowed and he asked, "What do the hunters hunt?" "Hunting various sea beasts in the Dark Sea." The spiritualist frowned and said, "Of course, they can also hunt other hunters. Therefore, there will be alliances between the cities to deal with other hunters." Nyetian smiled faintly as he came to a realization. The 4th main city and the 7th main city were originally allies. Unfortunately, the 7th main city was too weak. The 4th main city looked down on this ally and wanted to make this ally its vassal city in advance. If it were not for Nyetian today, the 7th main city would have become the vassal city of the 4th main city. Then, Nyetian and the others asked a few more questions to get a better understanding of the Dark Sea Hunt. "My young friend Nyetian, the Dark Sea Hunt will start in 10 days. You should stay in the City Lord Mansion first and prepare to participate in the hunt in 10 days. The spiritualist could not hide his excitement and said in a deep voice. He felt that if Nyetian and the others represented the 7th main city to participate in the hunt, the 7th main city's ranking might drop, but it would still be easy for them to keep their name. "City Lord, I have a question." Nyetian laughed and said, "If we get the first place in the Dark Sea Hunt, does it mean that the 7th main city will be promoted to the 1st main city and the City Lord will become the next Dark Emperor?" When the spiritualist heard Nye Tian's words, he was stunned and froze on the spot, unable to speak for a long time. He did not expect that Nye Tian would have such an idea. Indeed, according to the rules of the Dark Sea Hunt, the city lord of the first main city would be the Dark Emperor. However, the first main city had a total of 50 hunters, and each of them was stronger than the hunters of the other cities. The Dark Sea prison had existed for a long time, and the second main city and below were constantly changing. Only the first main city would always be the first main city, and there had never been an exception. "My young friend Nye Tian, you think too much." The spiritualist reacted and laughed dryly. "As long as you help the seventh main city to keep its position, I will be satisfied. As for the first main city, don't even think about it. Also, I would like to remind you that you can fight with the hunters of the other main cities. But do not fight with the hunters of the first main city. If you encounter them, just avoid them immediately." The spiritualist looked at Nye Tian and the others and reminded them again, "You must remember this." Nye Tian smiled faintly and did not speak. Of course, he understood what the spiritualist meant. There were 50 hunters in the first main city, and once they offended the people of the first main city, it was equivalent to having 50 powerful enemies. Any main city, let alone, would not be able to fight against the first main city, even if many cities joined forces. Most importantly, the city lord of the first main city was the Dark Emperor of the Dark Sea prison. The Dark Emperor was a supreme existence in the Dark Sea Dark prison. No city lord would dare to challenge the dignity of the Dark Emperor. Chapter 2373. Next, Nye Tian and the others stayed in the city magistrate's mansion in the seventh major city, where they waited for the Dark Sea Hunt to begin. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. In the air above the seventh major city, several figures could be seen. They were none other than the spiritualist, Nye Tian, and the others. "Let's go, Nye Tian." The spiritualist nodded, then blurred into motion toward the sea. Nye Tian and the others followed close behind. Before long, they were in the air above a dark, gloomy valley. By this point, the sky above the valley was packed with people. Today was the day the Dark Sea Hunt began. All 17 major cities and 83 vassal cities of the Dark Sea Onyx had arrived. Nye Tian swept his gaze across the crowd and spread out his soul awareness. More than half of the hunters were peak paramount gods, and the other half were late paramount gods. Only a few of them were below the level of late paramount gods. "I never would have guessed that a puny place like the Dark Sea Onyx would be stronger than all 9 realms put together," Nye Tian murmured to himself. According to his estimations, there weren't many peak paramount gods in the 9 realms, maybe only a few hundred. But there were hundreds of peak paramount gods in the Dark Sea Onyx penitentiary. The Dark Sea Onyx didn't have a very strong god power, but its unique spatial structure made it very beneficial for cultivation. Unfortunately, the Dark Sea Onyx was a sealed dimension that no one could leave. Otherwise, the Dark Sea Onyx would have been occupied by the Dark Sea Onyx. "Nye Tian," the spiritualist said, looking at Nye Tian. "The Dark Sea Hunt is off your hands," he said. Nye Tian nodded and smiled in response. The reason he was participating in the Dark Sea Hunt was partly because he had made a promise to Nye Tian, and partly because he wanted to see how strong the people of the Dark Sea Onyx were. It would be very helpful in helping them rescue 7 kills. "Yang Qi," the spiritualist said, turning to Yang Qi, "you must listen to our young friend Nye Tian after we enter the Dark Sea Hunt." "Yes." Yang Qi nodded. He already knew how strong Nye Tian was, and Nye Tian had saved his life. Therefore, he was willing to listen to Nye Tian. Lian Jiufeng's expression didn't look good, but he didn't say anything. This time, the 7th city had sent 10 hunters, including Nye Tian's group of 6, and Yang Qi's group of 4. The reason Nye Tian had brought Jun Aoqing and Nye Qingwan was because he didn't want them to be by his side. Moreover, he had the 9 extremities with him. If there was any danger, the 2 of them could enter the 9 extremities to avoid danger. At this moment, Nye Tian wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he waited quietly for the dark sea hunt to begin. City Lord Qi, long time no see. However, right at this moment, an extremely unfriendly voice rang out. Then, a fat old man appeared, his eyes filled with disdain as he looked Nye Tian and the others up and down. Lord 8th City Lord. The spirit controller forced a smile, but his expression was not good. The person in front of him was the 8th City's Lord, Lin Yibiao. Everyone in the Dark Sea prison knew that the 7th City and the 8th City didn't get along. During the last Dark Sea hunt, several hunters from the 8th City had died at the hands of the 7th City. This enmity had extended to an irreconcilable point. Now that the 7th City was weak, the 8th City had to step on them. Lin Yibiao's gaze swept over Nye Tian and the others, and he said in a strange tone, "Wow, the 7th major city's hunters are not bad. There's even a peak paramount god." Even an idiot could tell that he was insulting the 7th City. Lin Yibiao's voice was very loud. It attracted the attention of the crowd. Everyone's gazes landed on Nye Tian and the others, and immediately, they roared with laughter. "I knew the 7th City was weak, but I didn't expect it to be this weak." That's right. Look at the hunters from the 7th major city. Other than that peak paramount god, they're all the same. Oh my god! Am I seeing things? There's actually a sovereign expert there. It really is a lord. The 7th major city has declined to such an extent that it actually sent a main god to participate in this battle. Everyone spoke one after another. In the end, they all focused their gazes on Nye Qingwan. It had to be said that Nye Qingwan was indeed a unique existence among all the hunters. Even the hunters from the vassal cities had the strength of a paramount god. Nye Qingwan was only a peak lord. In the long history of the Dark Sea hunt, Nye Qingwan was the only hunter with the strength of a lord. QL11 After all, Nye Qingwan was a little girl. Being stared at by so many people, her little face was not normal. Her eyes were red and swollen. She was about to cry. "Little sister Qingwan, it's okay. These people are just a bunch of idiot." Jun Aoqing quietly held Nye Qingwan's hand and said in a low voice, "Little girl, how arrogant of you to say that others are idiots." But Lin Yibiao heard Jun Aoqing's words clearly. He deliberately raised his voice and shouted. Jun Aoqing frowned and looked at Lin Yibiao coldly. She just wanted to comfort Nye Qingwan and didn't think too much about it. Who would have thought that Lin Yibiao would be so shameless? He caught Jun Aoqing's words and caused her to anger the crowd. Hearing Lin Yibiao's words, the crowd immediately became agitated and started to talk. "Who is this little girl? How dare she call us idiots? I think she's the idiot. She only has the strength of a late-stage paramount god. When the hunt starts, I'll kill her first." The people from the 7th City are not only weak but also terrifyingly stupid. How dare she call others idiots? Angry words rang out one after another. The crowd was very agitated. Jun Aoqing's pretty face became very ugly. Even if she didn't care, she couldn't calm down. The spiritualist's old face was also very ugly. He couldn't help but glare at Jun Aoqing. If it weren't for Nye Tian, he would have scolded Jun Aoqing for not thinking before speaking. Just as the crowd was getting agitated, a cold voice rang out. "So what if I say you're idiots?" Nye Tian took a step forward. His face was grim and murderous. He said coldly, "I think it's very well said. You're all idiots." As the cold voice fell, the scene instantly fell into a deathly silence. Everyone's eyes froze, and then they stared at Nye Tian. Jun Aoqing's words were just a slip of the tongue. But now, Nye Tian was publicly insulting them. Nye Tian didn't care about the expressions of the people around him. Instead, he stared at Lin Yibiao and said in a loud voice, "The city lord of the 8th city, right? I think you're the most idiotic of all these idiots." The most idiotic. His words were like a clap of thunder in Lin Yibiao's ears, shocking him so much that he froze. The crowd's eyes also trembled, and their expressions were extremely shocked. Chapter 2374. The scene fell into a dead silence. Everyone's eyes were focused on Nie Tian and the 8th City Lord Lin Yibiao. Nie Tian's expression was calm and indifferent, without a trace of nervousness or discomfort. On the other hand, Lin Yibiao's face turned green, then white and finally green. He was the lord of a main city, yet he was insulted by a junior in front of so many people, calling him the most idiotic person in the city. How could he endure such humiliation? His body was trembling, which was a sign that he was about to explode. People could even clearly hear Lin Yibiao's heavy breathing. "Little bastard, you're courting death." All of a sudden, Lin Yibiao let out a furious roar. 2 beams of cold light shot out of his eyes as his aura surged like ocean waves. He took a step forward and thrust his palm out towards Nie Tian in a frenzied manner. The crowd's eyes trembled, and they looked extremely horrified. No one expected that Lin Yibiao would ignore his status and directly attack Nie Tian. Nie Tian stood in the same place and looked at Lin Yibiao calmly. There was no fear, but even more contempt. "Lin Yibiao, do you think I is just a decoration?" At this moment, a powerful roar sounded, and then an even more terrifying palm shadow appeared, directly blocking Lin Yibiao's palm. Lin Yibiao's figure slightly swayed, and he was forced to take a few steps back. He suddenly stabilized his body and saw that the person standing in front of him was the spiritualist. The spiritualist stared at Lin Yibiao coldly. Nie Tian was the barrier of the 7th main city to maintain its position. How could he let others hurt Nie Tian? "7th City Lord, step back!" Lin Yibiao roared cold, and his eyes were like a wild beast, wanting to swallow Nie Tian alive. "Step back!" The spiritualist sneered and said, "Lin Yibiao, the person who should step back is you. You're also a city lord. Don't you feel ashamed to attack a junior in such an occasion like the Dark Sea Hunt?" When the crowd heard the spiritualist's words, their gazes froze and they couldn't help but whisper to each other. The 8th City Lord is the City Lord of a main city. Openly attacking the hunters of the 7th main city is indeed bullying the weak. The 8th City Lord is also furious. That brat from the 7th main city is too infuriating. He directly called the 8th City Lord the most idiotic. No one can stand it. Although the 7th main city is weak, the 7th City Lord is not a pushover. I don't think the 8th City Lord is a match for him. The crowd began to discuss among themselves, which caused Lin Yibiao's face to redden even more after hearing their words. The Dark Sea Hunt was a major event in the Dark Sea Black Prison. It was indeed inappropriate to fight with a junior on such an occasion. But Lin Yibiao was insulted by Nie Tian in public, and he simply could not swallow it. "City Lord Qi, you're from the 7th main city, yet you're insulting this city lord in front of so many people. Shouldn't you teach him a lesson?" Lin Yibiao calmed down and loudly reprimanded. "You asked for it when I insulted you." Before the spiritualist could respond, Nie Tian said in a cold voice, "If you hadn't provoked me first, would I have insulted you? The strength of the hunters from the 7th main city is our own business. We don't need people to criticize us." As he spoke, Nie Tian's gaze swept across everyone, and he directly asked, "Are you hunters very strong? If anyone thinks they're stronger than me, feel free to come up and challenge me. I, Nie Tian, will take you on to the end." His arrogant voice was like a clap of thunder, shocking everyone. Following that, the entire place was in a state of chaos. "This silver-haired brat is so arrogant. I can't believe he dares to accept anyone's challenge. This little silver-haired brat says everyone else is an idiot, but I think he's the biggest idiot of them all. Isn't he just courting death by provoking so many people? This brat only has the strength of a late paramount god. Any one of the hunters here is a peak paramount god. Which one of them can't crush him?" Everyone was glaring coldly at Nie Tian, making no effort to hide the contempt in their hearts. More than half of the people present were peak paramount gods, and their cultivation bases were definitely higher than Nye Tian's. In their eyes, Nye Tian's brazen words were a bit too arrogant. "Anyone can talk big," Nye Tianling said with a cold smile. "If anyone doesn't like it, then come up and challenge me." He hadn't wanted to do this, but these people were looking down on him. Most importantly, they were treating Nye Qingwan like a joke, which was something that Nye Tian couldn't stand. "Since you think you're strong, then I, Nye Tian, will use my strength to prove that I'm stronger than all of you." Nye Tian scanned the area with his divine sense, and found that, with the exception of the city lords, no one else was a match for him. "How arrogant, brat," said a cold voice. At this moment, a cold voice rang out, following which a figure appeared, his cold gaze locked onto Nye Tian. He had a very exaggerated build, almost as large as Jean de Bao's. Furthermore, he bore a striking resemblance to Lin Yibiao, making it obvious that he was Lin Yibiao's son. He really was Lin Yibiao's son, and his name was Lin Qieying. He was the captain of the Dark Sea Hunt. "Young city lord, there's no need to use a butcher's knife to kill a chicken," said one of the men standing next to Lin Qieying. "Watch from the sidelines. Let me kill this brat." Lin Qieying's eyes darkened, and he seemed a bit displeased. He wanted to use Nye Tian to prove his strength to everyone. Of course he wasn't happy that this brat was trying to steal his thunder. "Qieying," Lin Yibiao said coolly, "there's no need for you to do anything. Let Lin Shi do it." Lin Qieying was stunned. He didn't understand why Lin Yibiao had stopped him. But he couldn't go against Lin Yibiao's wishes, so he turned to look at Lin Shi and said, "Little Shi, have some fun with this kid. Don't let him die too easily. I like to see him die slowly." "Don't worry, young city lord. I understand." Lin Shi chuckled. Of course, he understood what Lin Qieying meant. QL11 Lin Qieying didn't want Nye Tian to die too quickly. He wanted to torture Nye Tian to death slowly. Lin Shi took a step forward and leaped into the air. Nye Tian's figure appeared almost at the same time, standing opposite Lin Shi. "Brat, do you think I should break your hand first? Or should I break your leg first?" Lin Shi looked coldly at Nye Tian and chuckled. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Nye Tian's mouth as he asked, "What do you think?" It's better to break my arm first." Lin Shi chuckled. His eyes darkened and his killing intent was revealed. "As you wish." Nye Tian's expression changed at the same time as he murmured, Lin Shi sensed that something was wrong in an instant, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. Swoosh. However, at this moment Nye Tian's figure moved. Then, a sword shadow that was as sharp as lightning suddenly shot out like a rainbow and flew over. Lin Shi only saw a cold flash before his eyes. The next moment, he felt a sharp pain in his arm. "My arm." He looked down and saw that his entire arm was gone. He immediately howled like a pig being slaughtered. Chapter 2375. The scene in the sky caused everyone's eyes to tremble, and their expressions to freeze. This was something that no one had expected. It was way beyond their expectations. "What's going on?" The crowd came to their senses and screamed in shock. They still felt like they were hallucinating, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Most people didn't know when Nye Tian had struck. They only saw a sword shadow whizzing past, and then Lin Shi's arm was severed. Lin Shi was a peak paramount god. Although he wasn't very powerful, he was still 2 minor realms higher than Nye Tian. Nye Tian had severed Lin Shi's arm in an instant. How did he do it? How is this possible? Lin Qieying cried out in shock, looking at the bloody scene in front of him. He even wondered if his eyes were playing tricks on him. How could he have imagined that a person whom he completely looked down upon would actually possess such astonishing strength? Nye Tian smiled faintly in the face of the crowd's astonishment. This was exactly what he wanted. Nye Tian publicly challenged so many people to tell them that the 7th major city wasn't a lamb that anyone could bully. The Dark Sea Hunt was about to begin. If people from other cities thought that the seventh major city was a pushover, they would be in a lot of trouble. In order to avoid unnecessary harassment, Nyetian acted so domineeringly that no one dared to look down on them. At that moment, Nyetian's cold voice came from the sky. I've severed your arm. Are you going to sever your leg next? No. Lin Shi was shocked. His eyes narrowed, and he almost subconsciously cried out, whoosh. But as soon as he finished speaking, a sword shadow whizzed past, and his other arm was severed. This. The crowd's eyes trembled violently. They were completely shocked by the scene in front of them. In front of Nyetian, Lin Shi was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. He didn't have the slightest ability to fight back. But the strange thing wasn't Nyetian going to sever his leg? Why did he sever Lin Shi's arm? Sorry, my sword seems to have deviated a little. High up in the sky, Nyetian's mocking and cold voice resounded, but the next sword strike will be to break your legs. No, no. Lin Shi was so frightened that his face turned pale. His entire body was already dripping with blood. He directly knelt down and wailed, "My lord, I was wrong, I admit defeat." It's good that you know you're wrong. Nie Tianling sneered and retracted his sword will. He didn't want to kill Lin Shi. He just wanted to use the latter to intimidate everyone. Now that the intimidation effect had been achieved, there was no need for him to make another move. When Lin Shi saw Nie Tian retract his sword intent, he instantly moved and retreated pathetically. Although he had lost both of his arms, he had the life force of a peak paramount god, so he wasn't in any life-threatening danger. In fact, it would only take a few months for his arms to grow back. However, it was impossible for Lin Shi to participate in the Dark Sea hunt. For a person who had lost both his arms to participate in the hunt, he was courting death. The crowd's eyes trembled violently as they locked onto Nie Tian, shock written all over their faces. Nie Tian's battle prowess was beyond everyone's expectations. Everyone was shocked. The spiritualist looked very pleased with himself as he stared at Nie Tian. He had personally witnessed Nie Tian injure Yuan Lai with a single strike of his sword. None of the people in front of him were a match for Nie Tian. Lai Yin Jiufeng's expression was also very calm. Of course he knew that Nie Tian's strength would be very beneficial to the seventh major city in the upcoming Dark Sea hunt. At the very least, there wouldn't be any idiots who would dare to cause trouble for the seventh major city. Moreover, he was more than happy to let Nie Tian steal the limelight. That way, he would be able to hide his identity even better. At that moment, Nie Tian stood high up in the sky, his eyes filled with killing intent as he called out arrogantly, "Who else wants to challenge me?" The crowd trembled when they heard Nie Tian's voice. Some people even subconsciously took a step back. The scene was silent for a dozen or so seconds. No one dared to step forward. With a cold laugh, Nie Tian said, "You were very arrogant just now. How come you've all become mute now?" His figure blurred as he prepared to descend from the sky. "Brat, you're too arrogant." At this moment, a furious voice rang out. Then, a figure rushed into the sky and stood in front of Nie Tian. "It's the captain of the 8th major city." The crowd's eyes narrowed. They immediately recognized the person. It was Lin Qiang from the 8th major city. Qiang. The 8th city lord Lin Yibiao's heart sank when he saw Lin Qiang challenge Nie Tian. His expression instantly turned ugly. He could vaguely sense that Nie Tian was hiding even greater strength. It was not a wise move for Lin Qiang to challenge Nie Tian. However, Lin Qiang was too fast. He couldn't stop him in time. "So it's you." Nie Tian looked at Lin Qiang in front of him. The corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. He said loudly, "Your father is an idiot. You're even more of an idiot than him. You know you're no match for me, but you still want to embarrass yourself. Your face came up for me to slap. If I don't slap you, wouldn't that be too disrespectful to you?" His voice sounded again and again, each sentence more arrogant than the last. Lin Qiang's chest heaved violently. He couldn't wait to tear Nie Tian's body into pieces and then burn his bones to ashes. The crowd looked at Nie Tian and Lin Qiang with trembling eyes. At the same time, they released a blazing light. Lin Qiang's strength was obviously much stronger than Lin Xi's. However, Nie Tian's attitude was even more arrogant. He didn't put Lin Qiang in his eyes at all. "Brat, go to hell!" Lin Qiang was completely infuriated by Nie Tian. He roared and the aura of his whole body surged. Waves of violent power rushed into the sky like an avalanche, blooming in the void. Even the space seemed to tremble. "Is that all?" Faced with Lin Qiang's rage, the corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and the disdain on his face became even more obvious. "Damn it! Die!" Lin Qiang charged over like a wild beast. The aura of his whole body surged, and his whole body turned into a huge white snowball. White snowflakes floated in the air. QL11 Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Lin Qiang was obviously a martialist with a cold attribute. Furthermore, his physique belonged to the strength type. Coupled with his cold attribute power, he was indeed far stronger than martialists with ordinary attributes. Unfortunately, the enemy he was facing now was Nie Tian. Boom! The huge snowball came crashing down like a collapsing mountain. The sudden burst of aura made people tremble. However, Nie Tian's expression didn't change. The starry sky slash appeared in his hand and he slashed with it. A terrifying sword shadow whizzed out like a pillar that supported the sky and bombarded the huge snowball. Rumble! Hum! The sword's shadow was like a towering mountain, and it directly blocked the snowball's attack. The huge snowball suddenly stopped, and then it began to spin in the air, making an ear-piercing roar. The crowd was stunned by this scene, and their eyes widened. "Get lost!" In the next moment, Nie Tian roared. The sword intent on the sword's shadow burst forth, and the sword light shone brightly like a blazing sun. Bang! With a muffled sound, the snowball was sent flying and gradually melted in the air. Chapter 2376. The scene in midair shocked everyone, and their expressions became sluggish. Countless gazes locked onto the blood-colored figure high up in the sky in shock. The blood-colored figure was Lin Qiang. At this moment, Lin Qiang stood shakily in the air, like a broken leaf in a gale, about to wither and shatter at any moment. If one looked closely, they would see that his body was covered with glaring wounds, and the wounds were so deep that bones could be seen. These wounds were obviously caused by sword intent. Nie Tian's sword intent had penetrated through the cold power and directly hit Lin Qiang's body. Seeing Lin Qiang's injuries, the onlookers all took a deep breath in. They were all shocked. Nie Tian's strength was insane. He had injured Lin Qiang with a casual strike. Lin Qiang's injuries were even more serious than Lin Xi's, who had lost both arms. How is this possible? Lin Yibiao looked on from below, and his expression seemed to be dull as he spoke. He couldn't imagine how Nie Tian's sword intent could be so powerful. Of course he could see that when the snowball and the sword shadow collided, the sword intent had penetrated through the snowball and hit Lin Qiang's body. But the question was, why was Nie Tian's sword intent so terrifying? Your strength. Lin Qiang's body swayed slightly in the sky, and his voice trembled. Stop talking. Save your energy. Before he could finish, Nie Tian sneered and said, You want to ask why I'm so strong, right? I just want to tell you that it's not that I'm too strong, but that you're too weak. I really don't understand how a weak person like you can be so arrogant. These words fell into Lin Qiang's ears, but they were like sharp awls that pierced his heart. Nie Tian didn't admit that he was strong, but said that Lin Qiang was too weak. This was an even heavier blow to Lin Qiang. In fact, with Nie Tian's strength, that strike just now was enough to kill Lin Qiang, but he didn't want to do so. After all, there was no deep hatred between him and Lin Qiang. It was enough to teach the latter a lesson. At this moment, A figure rushed into the sky and came to Lin Qiang's side. It was the 8th City Lord, Lin Yibiao. Seeing Lin Yibiao suddenly appear, everyone's eyes trembled, and their gazes instantly became blazing hot. Obviously, everyone wanted to see the scene of Lin Yibiao attacking Nie Tian. Almost at the same time, another figure appeared, standing not far behind Nie Tian. It was the spiritualist. The spiritualist was very concerned about Nie Tian and would never allow anyone to hurt Nie Tian. However, Lin Yibiao's expression was surprisingly calm. He didn't attack Nie Tian. Instead, he looked at Lin Qiang and asked, "Qiang, are you all right?" Lin Qiang nodded slightly, her face as pale as a sheet. Although he was heavily injured, his life was not in danger. It had to be said that Nie Tian's attack was just right. While seriously injuring Lin Qiang, it didn't hurt his life. Lin Yibiao nodded, then turned to look at Nie Tian. His expression was very complicated, and he didn't speak for a long time. 8th City Lord, what do you want to say? Nie Tian smiled faintly and was very calm. He didn't sense any killing intent from Lin Yibiao, which made him feel very strange. Little brother, thank you for showing mercy. The 8th City Lord is sincerely convinced of our loss. Unexpectedly, Lin Yibiao said loudly with a serious expression. When everyone heard Lin Yibiao's words, they were stunned. Their eyes widened as if they suspected that they had heard wrong. Who would have thought that after Nie Tian injured Lin Qiang, Lin Yibiao would actually thank Nie Tian? Lin Yibiao's gratitude at this time caught everyone off guard. In front of so many people, this thank you was not as simple as just saying thanks. At this moment, in everyone's opinion, Lin Yibiao's action was admitting defeat. The dignified city lord of a main city actually yielded to a junior. This was practically a first in the Dark Sea Black Prison. Nie Tian frowned and his eyes narrowed slightly. Lin Yibiao's sudden apology was also something he didn't expect. However, in his opinion, Lin Yibiao's action at this moment was very wise. At least it showed that Lin Yibiao was not a complete idiot. Nie Tian's 2 attacks could have easily killed Lin Shi and Lin Qiang. However, Nie Tian didn't do so. This was enough to show that he didn't want to be enemies with anyone. Lin Yibiao's current attitude had reversed. He looked very stupid on the surface, but he was actually very smart. The Dark Ocean hunt had not even begun, and Lin Qiang and Lin Shi were both already seriously injured. This meant that there was basically no hope for the 8th main city. After the Dark Sea hunt, there was no way they could keep their position as the main city. The 7th city had Nie Tian, and it was the least likely that it could retain its position as a city. Therefore, Lin Yibiao didn't want to completely offend the 7th city. One had to admit that this guy's brain worked quite fast. 8th City Lord, you're too kind. Nie Tian smiled slightly and responded indifferently. Lin Yibiao nodded and forced a smile. He then looked at the spiritualist and bowed slightly. He said, 7th City Lord, for this Dark Ocean hunt, the 8th city would like to form an alliance with the 7th city. What do you think? The faint voice caused an uproar among the crowd. Who would have thought that Lin Yibiao would want to form an alliance with the 7th city? However, everyone understood after thinking for a while. The 7th city had a powerhouse like Nie Tian, and there were few opponents in the Dark Ocean hunt. At this time, forming an alliance with the 7th city was undoubtedly the wisest choice. The spiritualist was stunned at first, then he smiled and said, 8th City Lord, I has given full authority over the Dark Ocean hunt to Nie Tian. If you want to form an alliance, there's no need to ask I. Just ask Nie Tian directly. The spiritualist's words once again stunned everyone. Everyone thought that the spiritualist would directly answer Lin Yibiao. However, who would have thought that the spiritualist would give the decision to Nie Tian, as if he couldn't decide on this matter, and only Nie Tian could. It seemed that the spiritualist did not treat Nie Tian as a subordinate, but as a partner with equal status. The next moment, everyone's eyes focused on Nie Tian, waiting for the latter's answer. Nie Tian raised the corner of his mouth, smiled faintly, and said loudly, "Eighth City Lord, forget about the alliance. But I can assure you that if I meet the people from the Eighth City during the Dark Ocean Hunt, I will never attack them. Consider it as compensation for the 2 people I injured just now." The faint voice was calm and indifferent, but it was full of arrogance. Everyone's eyes trembled and they were surprised. Even a fool could hear that Nie Tian was disdainful of forming an alliance with the Eighth City. In fact, thinking about it, the Eighth City's hunting captain was crippled, and its current strength was similar to that of a vassal city. There was indeed no need for an alliance. Lin Yibiao's old face sank and he was extremely embarrassed, but he didn't dare to show it too much. He could only nod slightly and said, "Thank you, Nie Tian." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said nothing more. Then, he turned and prepared to leave. Chapter 2377. The sudden voice took everyone by surprise, and they turned to look at the source of the voice. 8 in the air, a white-robed figure appeared. He was handsome and had an imposing appearance. However, his eyes were filled with a cold light. "It's him." Everyone was shocked when they saw the face of the white-robed figure. Obviously, this white-robed man was very famous, and many people knew him. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his divine sense swept over the white-robed man, and the corner of his mouth curled into a calm smile. This white-robed man was not weak. He was a peak paramount god martial artist, and his aura was much stronger than other martial artists of the same level. Even Lin Qiang's aura was much weaker than the white-robed man's. "It's Bai Fengming." At that moment, the spiritualist exclaimed from behind Nie Tian. "Bai Fengming." Nie Tian was stunned, and then he transmitted his voice to the spiritualist and asked, "City Lord, is this guy very powerful?" "Yes." The spiritualist nodded and said, "There are 9 geniuses in the Dark Ocean Black Prison, and they are called the 9 demons. This guy is one of them. Yuan Lai, who was defeated by you before, is also one of the 9 demons. However, Yuan Lai ranks 9th among the 9 demons, and Bai Fengming ranks 3rd among the 9 demons. Bai Fengming's strength is even stronger than Yuan Lai. So that's how it is." Nie Tian smiled as he looked at Bai Fengming with a slightly more serious look in his eyes. Judging from his aura, Bai Fengming was indeed not weaker than Yuan Lai. However, this did not mean that Nie Tian was afraid of him. "What? Do you also want to challenge me?" Nie Tian looked at Bai Fengming as he asked. Bai Fengming chuckled and slowly walked over. As he walked, he said, "You are able to defeat Yuan Lai with a single stroke. I would like to see how strong you are." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He immediately understood that Bai Fengming was here to avenge Yuan Lai. Bai Fengming's words shocked everyone at the scene, causing a commotion. "Did I hear wrongly just now? Young Master Bai said that this kid defeated young Master Yuan Lai with a single sword strike. Is that possible? Young Master Bai is right. This kid is too abnormal. He can actually defeat Yuan Lai, and it's even a single sword strike. No wonder his strength was able to crush Lin Qiang. It turns out that he's a monster who defeated Yuan Lai with a single strike." As the crowd discussed, the way they looked at Nie Tian became even more fearful. In a short period of time, the crowd's view of Nie Tian changed again and again, from the initial complete disdain to the current shock and fear. This was the effect of strength. Strength determined one's status. As one of the 9 demons, Yuan Lai was very famous in the Dark Ocean Prison. Nie Tian defeated Yuan Lai with a single sword strike. This strength could be said to be abnormal. "Are you here to avenge Yuan Lai?" Nie Tian smiled as he looked at Bai Fengming. "You can say that." Bai Fengming's lips twitched as he said, "I'm the young master of the 2nd main city. Our 2nd main city has become allies with the 4th main city. Since you've defeated my ally, I would like to see how strong you are." With a cold voice and a sinister gaze, Bai Fengming's body exuded a sinister aura. "Very well, then make your move." Nie Tian did not waste any time and said straightforwardly. The dark ocean hunt was about to begin. He did not want to waste time on Bai Fengming. Don't be anxious. Bai Fengming laughed and said, Your sword intent is very strong. Why don't we change the method of competition? Let's compete in sword intent. How about that? Nie Tian was stunned. He then smiled and said, Are you sure you want to compete in sword intent with me? Bai Fengming was ranked third among the 9 demons. His strength should be much stronger than Yuan Lai. The main reason why Nie Tian defeated Yuan Lai with a single sword strike was because of the suppression of the demonic fire. However, against Bai Fengming, Nie Tian did not suppress it at all. Under normal circumstances, Nie Tian was not confident in fighting against Bai Fengming. However, if it was a competition of sword intent, then Bai Fengming would really be seeking his own death. Nie Tian's sword intent was once called the strongest sword intent by many godly state swordsmen in the abandoned land. Bai Fengming competing with Nie Tian in sword intent was completely seeking his own death. Of course. Bai Fengming laughed and said, Are you afraid? Afraid? Nie Tian laughed and said in a loud voice, I'm afraid that you'll lose too badly. Bai Fengming smiled cold and said, We'll only know who wins and who loses after the competition. As soon as he finished speaking, his body shook and suddenly a violent sword intent surged out. The sword aura was like a mountain, pressing down on the heaven and earth. What a strong sword aura! Seeing this, the crowd's eyes trembled and they exclaimed. Everyone knew that Bai Fengming was the only swordsman among the 9 demons. However, very few people knew exactly what level Bai Fengming's sword principle had reached. Rumor had it that there was a strange sword seal in Bai Fengming's body that could suppress the aura of his sword intent to the extreme. At this moment, seeing Bai Fengming release his sword intent, the crowd then knew that the rumor was indeed true. Nie Tian saw Bai Fengming's sword intent and his eyes narrowed slightly. He then smiled and thought to himself, So it's a hidden sword seal, no wonder he's so confident. Just now, Nie Tian did not sense Bai Fengming's sword intent. He only vaguely felt that the latter's aura was very sharp, like that of a swordsman. At this moment, Nie Tian only knew that there was a hidden sword seal in Bai Fengming's body. Bai Fengming had concealed his sword intent in the sword seal, so his sword intent aura was not obvious. At this moment, the spiritualist and Lin Yibiao's voices sounded almost at the same time. They were quite surprised. They both realized that Bai Fengming was at the peak of the sword and martial arts integration realm. This level of sword principle was too terrifying. One should know that Bai Fengming was not even 50,000 years old. The peak of the sword and martial arts integration realm is still a little weak. Nie Tian smiled faintly and his face was cold. He did not take Bai Fengming seriously at all. At this moment, Nie Tian was only at the intermediate level of the sword and martial arts integration realm. But his sword intent was very terrifying, especially the divine demon sword intent, which was formed by the fusion of several peak sword intents and the power of the divine demon. It was extremely terrifying. If Bai Fengming was at the legendary level of the sword and martial arts integration realm, he might have a chance to fight against Nie Tian. But he was only at the peak of the sword and martial arts integration realm. He did not stand a chance against Nie Tian's sword intent. Kid, you're too arrogant. Bai Fengming felt the contempt in Nie Tian's eyes. His face sank and he said coldly, Does an intermediate swordsman with the sword and martial arts integration realm have the right to laugh at a peak swordsman with the sword and martial arts integration realm? Nie Tian smiled faintly and said indifferently, You'll know soon enough whether I have the right to laugh at you or not. You're courting death. Bai Fengming growled. He took a step forward and leaped into the air. The crowd's eyes were burning and focused on Nie Tian and Bai Fengming. They had already witnessed the strength of Nie Tian's sword intent. And Bai Fengming was ranked third among the 9 demons. He was also the only swordsman among the 9 demons. It made people wonder how strong his sword intent was,